Chapter 1968. It had to be said that under Chu Yang's leadership, everyone actually had the temperament of a true werewolf. This should be entirely attributed to Luo Kudi. On the other side, in the completely sealed and isolated tribulation space, Tai Budian and the others almost immediately fell into the turbulent and surging waves of rich spiritual energy almost as soon as they entered. They were tumbling and bobbing inside, like a small boat struggling to survive in an incomparably huge sea. In a general sense, for cultivators, the purer and denser the spiritual energy, the better it was. However, when this excess exceeded the limit, or even greatly exceeded the limit of tolerance, the best tonic would become a huge poison. Going too far was as bad as falling short. At this moment, the spiritual energy in the tribulation space was only a fine line away from becoming a lethal poison. Tai Butian and Wu Qianqian were the first in line to enter. So, they naturally stayed together. However, the two women were under the impact of the violent spiritual energy. So they couldn't see or touch the other person. In fact, they couldn't even think of the other person. That was because they couldn't even think of the other person. At this point in time, the only thing she could think of, or rather, the only thing she could think of every moment was, hurry up and collect the spiritual energy that was forcibly instilled into her body. Perhaps, her body would explode from this spiritual energy if she was a little late. This was originally an unimaginable land of feng shui. However, at this moment, it was full of tranquility and danger. For the first time, everyone discovered that too much and too dense spiritual energy could be fatal. When one's cultivation was low, it could cause one to explode. However, when one's cultivation was high, it could still cause one to explode at any time. One could only be forced to cultivate wholeheartedly, cultivate to the limit, refine, digest, and forcibly evolve to improve one's cultivation. This was like a person who had been eating non-stop. His mouth was constantly stuffed with food. Because he couldn't stop eating, he could only constantly exercise to the limit to digest. Because once he relaxed a little, he might choke to death from the food, or directly explode from the excessive amount of food in his stomach. When they first came in, everyone felt as if they were in heaven. They were extremely excited, and everyone was racing against time to cultivate. However, this situation lasted for less than a day, and everyone began to complain in their hearts. If this continued, it would be impossible for him to not race against time. What kind of place was this? It was simply an unconventional place that would take his life. Unknowingly, the tribulation space, which had been completely sealed, was slowly expanding. Because of this accident, the originally nearly perfect space had evolved once again, evolving to an even more perfect state. As for the palace of the Medicine King, it was slowly disintegrating due to the evolution of the tribulation space. Only the purple cloud pagoda was still standing in the center. The 10 saint crystals and 1 divine crystal had already reached the top of the purple firmament tower. Each floor was emitting a flickering light. In the herb field, in the atmosphere filled with extremely rich and pure spirit qi, the 3 spirit medicines were breathing in large mouthfuls of spirit qi with contented expressions. Although their bodies were still the same size as before, there was already an obvious color of blood on their bodies. If it was said that they were as white as snow before, now it was as if they were dyed with a layer of rosy red. As for the surrounding spiritual herbs, they were also growing at a crazy speed. In the process of crazy growth, spiritual herbs were constantly reaching their peak age. Under normal circumstances, it was extremely difficult for herbs to exceed their own limits. Once they reached their peak age, they could only slowly wither. Previously, in the palace of the Medicine King, Chu Yang and the Sword Spirit had seen such a situation. But in the tribulation space, it was a different situation. As long as a spiritual herb reached its peak age and its medicinal efficacy reached its peak, the spirit medicines would have already waved their small hands to instantly absorb the purest surging medicinal efficacy. Then they would repeatedly absorb the external spirit qi and gradually reach their peak, gradually forming a kind of unique cycle. With such an endless supply of medicinal efficacy and the vast and endless spirit qi, even the spirit medicines were gradually unable to absorb it all. They could only condense a snow-white pill every once in a while and place it in front of them with a pained expression. In just a few days, the number of elixirs in front of Yao Ling's body had already exceeded 10, and this number was still increasing. The sword spirit stood quietly with his eyes closed, quietly enduring the cleansing of the pure spirit qi. He was trying hard to open up a new path that no one in the Phoenix clan had ever walked before. In the past, the Phoenix clan's cultivation techniques had only reached the heavenly human stage and there was no further progress. In order to achieve a breakthrough, the sword spirit was determined to create his own cultivation techniques. The Phoenix clan's cultivation techniques were also the result of continuous research by the predecessors. Since the predecessors could create their own cultivation techniques, why can't I create an even more profound cultivation technique? The sword spirit had such a thought, but he didn't know what kind of glory his intentions would bring to the Phoenix clan in the future. There were no absolutes in the world. Often, daring to dream was already half the battle won. Although the rest might require countless efforts to achieve, the first step was always the key. On the other side, Greasy Cat and Lazy were full of pain. Although the two of them were together, they were so overwhelmed by the spirit chi that they didn't even have time to say a word. Both of them were only at the heaven stage. In such an atmosphere it was difficult for them to survive. Xia Dan Feng, Huyan Aobua, Madame Mei, and the others were also in the same situation. Their cultivations were still below the two cats. No, they hadn't even reached the earth grade. Their strength was really very shallow. However, it was precisely because of this that their breakthroughs were relatively faster. The transformation of their physiques was also more thorough. Strictly speaking, they would obtain the greatest improvement in a short period of time. Everyone's cultivation was soaring. Duan Sangkong and Wang Dao, who were ranked 3rd and 4th, were on the left and right respectively. As the spirit chi whistled around them, the saber chi gradually circled and danced, gradually becoming sharp and lofty, extremely swift and fierce. Although Lightning Snake and the others were slightly on the periphery, the level of the spirit chi that they were enduring was still extremely terrifying. In such an environment at this moment, there was no time to consider anything else. The spirit chi in this space was simply endless. The purity and richness of the spirit chi didn't discriminate based on the strength of each person's cultivation. Those with low cultivation were gradually improving, and those with high cultivation were also gradually improving. It was like a person in a sea. Those who could drink water could only drink what they could, and those who couldn't drink water could only drink what they could bear. If there was a difference, it was just that those with bigger stomachs could drink a few more mouthfuls. Those with smaller stomachs naturally couldn't hold more. If they really drank too much and their stomachs couldn't bear it, then it would be a tragedy. This was obviously a wonderful phenomenon. However, among all the people who were enduring the spirit chi, the one who suffered the most was still Chu Yang. Others were unscrupulously trying their best to improve, but Chu Yang was the only one who couldn't. In such a tense place of escape, rashly improving was courting death. Therefore Chu Yang could only suppress it. He restrained himself and forcibly controlled the spirit chi. As the owner of the tribulation space, the spirit chi that he was enduring was of the highest level. He couldn't stop it at all. Running with all his might all the way, he couldn't exhaust even 1/10,000th of the spirit chi. Right now his dantian was already full. There was no more missing. Metal, wood, water, fire, and earth transformed into each other. The chi of life and death transformed into each other. The chi of heaven and earth converged into yin and yang. Every dantian was in a full state. So Chu Yang could only try to adjust the consumption of a part of the spirit chi while running to the limit and compress it to the limit. He compressed it fiercely, and it was so pure that it couldn't be compressed anymore. He used all possible means to compress the space bit by bit in order to accommodate the huge amount of spirit chi that seemed to have no limit. However, no matter how much he compressed and purified it to the limit, the little space he got was just a drop in the bucket. It was filled up again in an instant. Damn it. He compressed the power of his dantian again and again, almost crazily, to create a space that could accommodate new spirit chi. This process sounded simple, but it was actually extremely difficult. If it was just difficult, it was still okay. This process was extremely dangerous. There was the danger of chi deviation at every turn. This process should only be carried out in the quietest environment. No one could disturb him during the process. But Chu Yang didn't have such conditions at all. He could only complete it with great difficulty while running crazily. He had to bear the huge pressure of life and death at all times. He had to take care of every detail and every decision of his escape. He had to consider all the possible unexpected situations and think about the next step at all times. His heart was divided into 8 parts, but he had to take care of all aspects. He couldn't make any mistakes. On one hand, he had to choose the safest and most cautious escape route. He couldn't make any mistakes. Once he made a mistake, everyone would die together. On the other hand, he had to find a better anti-tracking method to confuse the enemy. If he didn't succeed, everyone would die. On the other hand, he had to pay attention to everyone's mental state. If he found any signs of danger, if he passed this stage, what about the next one? How could he continue to live strong at this moment? But at this time, the spirit chi from the tribulation space was still constantly scouring and compressing. He also had to pay attention to compressing his dantian and delay the opportunity to break through. Every time he succeeded in compressing it, the compressed space would quickly be filled with new spirit chi in an instant. The only thing he could do was to continue compressing it. Continue compressing it again. He just couldn't break through. Chu Yang felt that he was suffering from internal and external problems. He was suffering from internal and external problems. He was being ambushed from all sides. He had 1,000 kinds of feelings and all kinds of pain. But under such unimaginable hardships, Chu Yang actually completed them one by one. Chapter 1969. Chu Yang himself didn't even realize that the primordial real silk that had already been thinned out in his dantian was slowly increasing in number. Initially, when there was only one dantian, the primordial real silk was suspended in the middle. But now, every dantian was overflowing with spiritual energy. Basically, after a short period of time, a strand of primordial real silk would form and then quietly sink down to the bottom. And then, another strand, and another. The primordial real silk at the bottom grew more and more, and the primordial real silk in every dantian was different. Some were gold, some were green, some were gray, some were blue. Originally, the spiritual energy in Chu Yang's dantian was all in a gaseous state and then gradually turned into a mist. But now, it had already turned into a semi-liquid state and was thick. And Chu Yang was still madly compressing it. Perhaps the current Chu Yang still didn't know that it was this escape and this extremely harsh environment that allowed him to make a very special breakthrough. And this special breakthrough was even more important than breaking through to the heavenly human level or even the saint level. Originally, his advancement had been too fast and most of it had been done by external forces. No matter how miraculous the heavenly fortune pill was, and how compatible it was with his body, it was still an external force. Although it wouldn't cause any negative effects, it would still cause his foundation to be somewhat shaky. However, after this round of tempering, Chu Yang's foundation had become unbelievably solid. Or it could be said that this kind of firmness was something that no one in the entire Heaven Imperial Court had ever had before. This dantian also started to be used for real during this process. The group of 200 people broke through the forest like the wind and entered a stretch of grassland. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. This stretch of grassland was rarely visited by people since ancient times. It was as tall as a person. When 200 people entered this stretch of grassland, it was like 200 water droplets entering the sea. There were very few traces to be found. A feeling of safety that they hadn't felt for a long time flooded their minds at this moment. After going deeper into the grassland for 150 kilometers, someone was the first to roll his eyes and fall to the ground. He didn't lose consciousness, but fell asleep directly and entered the so-called deep sleep state. With one person as an example, the other 200 or so people all fell down in a disorderly manner. Everyone's face was filled with the joy of surviving a calamity as they panted heavily. However, they were truly exhausted. Although everyone was a top-notch expert with a steady mind, it was really too tiring to stay in this state of extreme flight for a long time without daring to relax. Everyone had already reached their limit half a day ago. Being able to persevere until here was already an extremely rare thing. They really couldn't persevere any longer. Chu Yang finally heaved a sigh of relief. This time when he relaxed he immediately felt that his 2 legs were sore and numb, and he could barely lift them. This was the consequence of suddenly relaxing one's mind under a mountain-like pressure. Chu Yang was very clear about this. In fact, he wasn't unfamiliar with it. But now it was indeed time to relax. Otherwise, not only these 200 people, but even Chu Yang himself wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Although they had not seen any signs of their pursuers, they had not experienced much sword light either. However, the danger was greater than any of the previous times. Because as long as they saw a trace of their pursuers, they would be completely wiped out. Because the enemy this time was too strong. So strong that they didn't dare to face them directly. However, even Chu Yang himself didn't expect that he would reach this prairie so smoothly. What is Meng Wuya doing now? What is he thinking about? I believe that it's impossible for him to lose me. Since I have seen this prairie, then Meng Wuya will certainly see the importance of this prairie. He won't let it go so easily. Chu Yang panted heavily as he pondered. His gaze unconsciously slid across the grass in front of him. Suddenly, his gaze tightened, and his heart beat violently for no reason. Chu Yang suddenly realized that he had overlooked an extremely important detail. The season. It was already late autumn. Although the grass still had a little bit of green, in fact, it didn't have much vitality and water. Most of the grass had already shown signs of drying up. Suddenly Chu Yang felt his scalp go numb. He suddenly jumped up and his complexion instantly became deathly pale. "Manor Lord Chu, what's wrong?" Che Su Chu was lying on the grass next to him. He was panting tiredly and looked like a dead fish. Seeing Chu Yang suddenly jump up in panic, he couldn't help but ask in surprise. Che Su Chu and Chu Yang hadn't known each other for a long time. But Che Su Chu had a considerable understanding of Chu Yang's personality. He was very clear that this temporary lord's countenance wouldn't change even if a mountain were to collapse in front of him. But even he had lost his composure at this moment. So, this undoubtedly meant that something very serious and negative was about to happen. Perhaps it had already happened. "Quick, tell everyone to get up and leave immediately. We have to leave in the shortest time and with the fastest speed. Leave this prairie." Chu Yang's complexion was deathly pale. "Right now, looking for us in this prairie is like looking for a needle in a haystack. It's the best time to rest. Why are you in such a hurry? What's wrong?" Che Su Chu also felt that something was wrong, but he still couldn't help but ask. He was really too tired. "There's no time to explain. Quick." Chu Yang kicked his body. Then his body turned like a whirlwind and he kicked everyone up one by one. Chu Yang used his strength very cleverly. He didn't hurt the muscles or bones of the people he kicked, but they would feel extreme pain. Even if they were in a deep sleep, they would still wake up. "Let's go," Chu Yang ordered. Everyone was full of resentment as they hurried along the way. They finally found a good place to take a breather, but this Villa Master Chu seemed to have gone crazy and kicked everyone up. What the hell is going on? Along the way they couldn't help but grumble and complain incessantly. But Chu Yang turned a deaf ear to them and only focused on rushing forward. Anyone who lagged behind or didn't listen to orders would be beheaded in public. There was no room for hesitation at this critical moment. Under the pressure of death, Chu Yang beheaded 3 people in a row. Then everyone resumed their speed. No matter how resentful, no matter how slow, and no matter how tired they were, it was still better than going to hell. The grassland in front of them was like the waves of the sea. The wind was blowing fiercely behind them. The wind was getting stronger and stronger, and Chu Yang's heart became more and more anxious. After running for about 200 miles, the strength that they had just gathered had completely disappeared. Their hearts were filled with dissatisfaction. But at this time someone suddenly sniffed. "Hey, what's this smell?" He turned his head to look. With one look he was scared out of his wits. Hundreds of miles behind them, the wind was blowing fiercely, and the fire had already soared to the sky. Half of the sky was burning red. Now the fire that filled the sky was chasing after the crowd along with the violent wind. Its power was extremely terrifying. "Fire! Fire! There's a fire behind us!" This person shouted in panic. "Everyone, don't look back!" Chu Yang fiercely ordered everyone, "Quickly run for your lives. If you can't run out of the grassland, you'll be caught and turned into roasted pigs." Chu Yang sighed from the bottom of his heart. Meng Wuye's reaction was a step faster than he had expected. He must have ordered the fire as soon as he saw this grassland. There was no hesitation at all. Moreover, the speed of their pursuit was twice as fast as what he had expected in the worst-case scenario. At this moment, everyone felt as if they had suddenly obtained an endless amount of energy. Under the boundless fear, their originally weak and limp legs suddenly had an inexhaustible amount of energy. Run like crazy. With everyone's cultivation, they were naturally not afraid of a mere grassland fire. But the truly terrifying ones were the people who set the fire. Once this grassland was burned to the ground, there would be no chance for them to survive if they continued to linger on the grassland. Even if they dug a hole and hid underground, they would be dug out in the shortest time possible. The only way to survive was to quickly leave the grassland. Fierce wind, fierce fire. In the fierce wind, in front of the fierce fire, they ran at top speed. A person's strength was limited. Under the pursuit of the fire that filled the sky, they were quickly closing in. This was already an exhausted group of people who were at the end of their rope. There was a trace of despair on everyone's face. "Don't be afraid. Although the fire is a crisis, it is also a turning point." Chu Yang shouted, "We are in front of the fire and they are behind it. The fire is the best thing to block the detection of divine sense. Moreover, there is smoke everywhere. They will definitely not be able to determine our direction in a short time. The fire can certainly burn us out, but it will also completely block their detection. The current situation is that as long as we can escape from this fire, then we will have at least 2 hours of buffer time. This fire is undoubtedly a disaster. But we left early, so it can be considered as helping us indirectly. We are now looking for a way out in the face of death. As long as we don't give up, hope will not abandon us. Chu Yang's words at this moment were honestly very far-fetched, and it was also very wishful thinking. But when these words were heard by everyone, their spirits were suddenly shaken. Made sense. If there was a turning point, there would be a chance of survival. If there was hope, there would be a future, a bright future. Therefore, everyone gritted their teeth and ran forward, stirring up all their life potential to move forward. Most of them felt ashamed in their hearts. They had previously complained about the Manor Master, but now they knew how childish they were. After so many years of experience in the martial world, they were actually not as good as a young man. They even had to complain about him. If not for Manor Master Chu, if they had really waited until they saw the fire and started to run, then none of them would have been spared. Chapter 1970. Once this thought arose in everyone's mind, in addition to fear, they also felt a sense of guilt. Unknowingly, Chu Yang's image in the eyes of these people had become more trustworthy. Now, if one were to say that Chu Yang was their only savior, none of these people would refute it. Because this was the truth. Meng Wuya led the army in a big circle to determine the correct direction of Chu Yang and the others. Then he chased after them at full speed. However, by the time he saw the corpses of the werewolves in the forest, Chu Yang and the others had already left. Meng Wuya knew that he could not let the situation worsen. If things continued to develop, he might not have the opportunity to catch up with anyone. So he urged the whole army to forcefully stimulate their own energy. Without any hesitation, they finally arrived at the edge of the grassland. However, when they saw the vast grassland in front of them that was undulating like waves, all of them felt a little depressed. Everyone knew that it was simply a fool's dream to find 200 people in such a place. Whether it was divine sense detection, aerial observation, or other investigative methods, nothing could be done in such a terrain. However, Meng Wuya did not hesitate. He only glanced at it and immediately gave an unexpected order. However, it was also the most correct order at the moment: burn. With this order, thousands of people began to move at the same time. Countless flames gradually rose. Using the wind and their own cultivation, the flames intensified and spread. In an instant, the raging flames soared into the sky. Waves of black smoke rose. In the blink of an eye, it had already filled the entire world. Seeing this, everyone cheered loudly. If Chu Yang and the others were here, they would not be able to hide under this fire. And this was indeed an excellent place to hide. From the countless traces and speculations that they had obtained before, it was clear that Chu Yang and the others were in this grassland. Moreover, they must have fallen into an extreme state of exhaustion. This time they were doomed to be unable to fly even if they had wings. Only Meng Wuya was not blindly optimistic. He frowned and stood in front of the soaring flames. He calmly observed all the movements in the fire. He knew that Chu Yang must be somewhere in this grassland at this moment if there wasn't this big fire. He believed that Chu Yang would have countless methods and tactics to completely escape and shatter his pursuit. Therefore, he could only take drastic measures to extinguish the fire. However, Chu Yang would probably take advantage of the intensity of the fire to escape quickly after it was set on fire. His divine sense was no longer useful. Unless Chu Yang was in the middle of the prairie when the fire started. And that was also the safest place in the entire terrain. In that case, it would be difficult for Chu Yang to soar even if he had wings. However, Meng Wuya believed that Chu Yang was definitely not there. This trust came inexplicably. Even Meng Wuya himself didn't want to believe this, but this belief was deeply imprinted in Meng Wuya's heart, as if it was the truth, the reality. The fire spread rapidly. Steaming heat waves rose into the air. It completely isolated the probing of divine sense. Meng Wuya furrowed his brows as he watched the wind blow and the fire spread rapidly. A large area of black ash appeared in front of him. Meng Wuya waved his hand. Everyone gather. Chase after the fire. General. An officer beside him wanted to say something but hesitated. The fire was burning now. Chasing after the fire to search at this time was definitely more uncomfortable than searching after the fire. And Meng Wuya was seriously injured. He was afraid that it would harm his body. Quickly carry out the order. 5,000 people spread out in a fan shape and follow the fire closely. Pay special attention to the ground. Immediately turn around and turn over the soil wherever you go. Completely suppress the ashes. Meng Wuya ordered with a stern face. This order killed 2 birds with 1 stone. If Chu Yang and the others were really trapped by the fire and wanted to hide underground to avoid the fire and people, then they would inevitably be found out. 5,000 people spread out and followed the fire. Separated by a distance, they braved the fierce heat waves and entered the burning prairie. The distance between each person was only 10 feet. Like a huge net, they spread out towards the depths of the prairie where the smoke was rising from all directions. Immediately send a message to the flying ship on the opposite side. Tell the people on standby to go towards the smoke from the opposite side. Also, spread a net to surround and completely strangle the other side's living space. Yes. At this moment, Meng Wuya was still being carried by 4 people. His eagle-like eyes looked at the ground in all directions from time to time. His sage-level divine sense also spread out. It was truly an inescapable net. Chu Yang once again made a mistake in his calculations. He had originally predicted that at least after the fire had completely burned, Mo Yuntian's people would enter the prairie to search for traces of them. But after this, Chu Yang miscalculated. Mo Yuntian's people had indeed entered the prairie after the fire had burned, but not after it had completely burned. They had already entered the prairie when the fire was still burning in front of them. Chu Yang led everyone and rushed towards the edge of the prairie against the raging fire behind them. As the fierce wind was still chasing after Chu Yang and the others, although the fire had not really burned them yet, the extremely hot air had already spread over first. In front of them, it had already been burned into a vacuum. It was completely impossible to breathe. Looking out, it was also a space that was already distorted and tumbling by the heat waves. There was still the last 20 miles. Chu Yang took the lead and shouted in a low voice, "Don't turn back. No one is to turn back." Once they turned back and saw the overwhelming fire, their legs would immediately go soft. As long as they went soft, it would be completely over. Chu Yang and the others rushed into the mountain range in front of them like a whirlwind. Then Chu Yang's heart moved and his face changed greatly. Mountains. What kind of existence were mountains? Of course, mountains were full of stones. But there was no lack of grass and trees on any mountain. And behind them, the fire was only tens of miles away. It would catch up in a moment. Although they had already left the prairie after entering the mountains, they still had to face the situation of being chased by the fire. The worst thing was, under the illumination of the fire, Chu Yang and the others had nowhere to hide. Originally, it was already evening. The darkness of the night could be made use of, but now, the darkness and the fire had become fatal things. And right at the foot of the mountain there was a river. That was the best way to get rid of the fire. It was also the most convenient way now. But Chu Yang gave up without hesitation. After such a raging fire, the enemy's attention would definitely be focused on the word water. So, no matter what, they could not go to the river now. "Villa Master, I have an idea," an expert said softly. "What idea?" "We can set fire on the spot. This way we can clear out a section of the area. When the fire burns over, we don't have to worry so much." The expert was a little excited. He had always felt strange. Using fire to subdue fire, using fire to stop fire. This was clearly the best way to solve the problem. Why did the intelligent Villa Master Chu not think of it? Could it be that he was really muddle-headed? Bastard. Before Chu Yang could speak, a few people could not help but curse. Do you think that what we are really afraid of is the fire? This kind of fire can be easily suppressed by anyone. Even if we let the fire burn, it won't harm our lives. What we are afraid of is Mo Yuntian after the fire. And Meng Wuya with the strength of a sage. Once we set fire here, won't we tell them our approximate location? We have been running for so long. The best advantage, or perhaps the only advantage, is that our location has never been locked. You actually suggested setting fire? Using fire to stop fire. Do you want to kill everyone? A few experienced elders were so angry that their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. If it wasn't for the urgent situation, they would have fiercely beaten this guy up. He didn't do anything but cause trouble. That person's face immediately turned red. Everyone was talking and discussing, but their speed did not slow down at all. Now they had already rushed into the forest of the mountain range. With everyone's cultivation, as long as they wanted to escape, and as long as they still had strength, this kind of fire would definitely not be able to catch up with them before their cultivation was exhausted. The fierce wind passed through the mountain, whimpering like crying. Then the wind changed direction and it was like thousands of ghosts were crying. "Let's escape on this mountain." Chu Yang made a prompt decision. As for the fire, let it burn however it wants. But we have to get as far away as possible before the fire. This sudden fire may already be the fire of our lives. Before it burns out, our lives will not end. The crackling sounds behind them did not stop. Obviously, the fire had already begun to spread into the mountain range. At this moment, Chu Yang and the others had already entered the depths of the mountain forest. At this moment, if someone stood high up in the sky and looked down at the whole situation, he would discover a strange phenomenon. A streak of fire was rapidly advancing like a gigantic dragon. It was unstoppable. Behind the fire was Mo Yuntian and the others who were everywhere. Meng Wuya sat at the back and commanded. 5,000 people turned the entire grassland upside down, and their speed was still extremely fast. They were only a dozen miles away from the front of the burning fire. And the front of this fire had already begun to rush into the mountains, and filled the forest that was covered in flames. Chu Yang and the others were like a twisted gust of wind, and pierced through the depths of the forest towards the opposite side at lightning speed. On the opposite side of the mountain range, in front of Chu Yang and the others in a straight line, the other half of the 5,000 black cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers were spread out all over the mountains and plains, searching over like mercury flowing down the ground. According to the speed of the two sides, they would meet head-on in at most an hour. Once they came into contact, Chu Yang and the others would be attacked from two sides, and they would be like dumplings wrapped in dumplings. And all of this, the people of the three sides were still unaware of it at this moment. The great crisis that belonged to Chu Yang and the others was gradually approaching. Continue writing the 4th chapter. Requesting monthly votes. Chapter 1971. The people behind Chu Yang kept their mouths tightly shut. Everyone knew that they were in an extremely dangerous situation at this moment. If they were discovered by the enemy, it would mean that there was no chance for them to escape. At this time, everyone kept their distance from each other according to their previous agreement. The team was instantly divided into 4 groups. Time passed little by little. The curtain of night had already fallen. However, the fire that had spread for thousands of miles lit up this dark space as if it was daytime. The time it took for a stick of incense to burn passed in the blink of an eye. Behind the fire, someone shouted in surprise, "General Meng, we found 3 corpses here." Meng Wuya was startled. He immediately went over. They are the disciples of those 2 sections. All of them were beheaded by a sword. They were killed in one move. Meng Wuya looked at the corpses. He raised his head and thought carefully. Then he said decisively, "This should be the process of their escape. They were beheaded by Chu Yang as a warning to others. If that is the case, they should have escaped before the fire started. Otherwise, these 3 people would not have been beheaded because of some kind of resistance. So, they are most likely not in the grassland now." Everyone passed through the fire at full speed. The whole army is in pursuit. But why did they resist? Is it because the previous series of movements were too tiring? And this grassland gives people a rare sense of security. Although this sense of security is just a false package, it is real. Since they have already killed people because of this fleeing team should be on the verge of falling apart. It is a team that has been forcibly put together for the same purpose. It lacks the basic run-in. It is not going to be a big deal. It is not going to be a big deal. Meng Wuya was carried over the raging fire. He said indifferently, "Since that is the case, our men are coming from the opposite direction. We need to cut off their escape route. We can capture them in one fell swoop and complete the task in one fell swoop." The 5,000 men heard this and their spirits were lifted. Their speed increased sharply. The opportunity to complete the task was in front of them. Naturally, they chased with all their might. Chu Yang's original black clothes had changed. Now it was filled with other colors. He was moving forward. Suddenly he was startled. He stopped moving forward. It was not only him. Among the 117 people, 100 showed the same expression. There was someone ahead. In fact, it wasn't just the front that was approaching. People were approaching from all directions. When they discovered the enemy, the ink cloud guards on the other side had also discovered them. Suddenly someone shouted, "There's someone in front. It should be the target murderer. Charge." Enemies from all directions were quickly gathering towards them. For a time the atmosphere was incomparably heavy. There were enemies ahead and pursuers behind. The situation was so bad that it had reached the extreme. The 4th team. Chu Yang shouted coldly. The 48 members of the 4th team stepped forward in unison. Originally there were 50 people. But 2 of them had been killed by Chu Yang. So there were only 48 people left now. Chu Yang looked deeply at these people and said in a low voice, "There's no way forward. Please lead the way. Please." The remaining 140 people bowed at the same time. "Please." The 48 people all revealed a smile of relief on their faces as they said, "Everyone have a safe journey. Let's fight side by side in our next life." Suddenly, with a long howl, the 48 people brazenly rushed out. Where the smoke lingered, Everyone had a resolute look on their faces. No matter what, they had to fight their way out for the people they protected, even if they had to sacrifice themselves. They had to sacrifice themselves to the greatest value. At this moment, 1 to 200 black cloud guards had already gathered here and were charging over. The others were also on their way here at full speed. A long howl shook the night sky. Found Chuyang. In a distant place there were also countless howls echoing. Right at this moment the 48 people team was already like a giant bomb, howling and rushing into the ink cloud guards formation. Both sides had just come into contact, and in a split second huge roars rang out one after another. Blood suddenly became the main color of this night. Screams became the main melody of this night that was destined to not be peaceful. Those who don't die, leave your lives behind. Both sides had just come into contact, and a tragic situation of life and death was formed. Especially the people on Chuyang's side, they were even more determined to die. That sound of wanting to break through the path ahead even if they had to die instantly intimidated the opponents. These people were all elites of super sections. In terms of strength they were not weaker than the ink cloud guards and even surpassed them. Although their numbers were relatively small, at this moment, everyone was fighting with their lives on the line. Their sharpness was unparalleled. Sabers and swords were like a forest. One of the elites from Iron Sword sect charged towards the sabers and swords. He let out a long and hoarse laugh. Brother, don't forget that I have a great-grandson at home. I'll leave everything to you. One of the enemy's swords chopped off his left hand, but he was still smiling. The sword in his right hand had already pierced into the throat of an ink cloud guard. However, the moment the enemy was killed, his right hand holding the sword was also chopped off by the enemy, but he seemed not to have noticed it and continued to rush forward. The next moment, 7 or 8 swords pierced into the vital parts of his body almost at the same time. Countless destructive vital essence exploded in his body, but he only laughed. Leave quickly. Suddenly his body exploded with a boom. The explosion was so sudden that it shook the heavens and earth. Behind Chuyang someone let out a long sigh. Don't sigh. We don't have the time for that now. Leave quickly. Chuyang rushed out. This was the best time to escape. It was not that Chuyang was not sad, but now was definitely not the time to be sad. A series of explosions rang out. Those 48 people all chose to burn their spiritual energy and vitality to the extreme, and then rushed into the dense group of enemies to explode to death. They used their own lives to open up a path forward, and used their blood to create a path of escape. In the place where flesh and blood were scattered, the people they wanted to protect passed through just like that. In a situation where everyone's strength was about the same. These people burned all their remaining vitality and spiritual energy to the extreme. The power that could be exerted at the moment of self-explosion was at least 3 or 4 times stronger than under normal circumstances. How could Mo Yuntian and the others withstand it? No matter how fearless the ink cloud guards were, they were not truly fearless of death. But in the face of such enemies, they were also at their wits' end. As many as 70 to 80 ink cloud guards were buried in the place of these expert self-explosion. In addition, there were also many who were seriously injured by the shock. Chuyang showed no mercy. He swept past like the wind and with one sword he killed all of them. You must survive. The last expert of the 4th squad roared. Boom. A loud explosion was heard. There were only about 20 ink cloud guards left in front of him. The situation seemed to have reversed in an instant. Oh. In the distance, there was the sound of clothes fluttering in the air. Several voices shouted together, at all costs. Stop Chuyang. Large groups of ink cloud guards were rushing over one after another. The opportunity was fleeting. There was no room for hesitation. Chuyang let out an extremely sorrowful roar. The calamity sword flashed and he rushed straight over with his sword. Behind him, a total of 140 people were like a cone, and Chuyang was the tip of the cone. Calamity sword technique. What harm was there in slaughtering the whole world? The calamity sword brought out an extremely dazzling sword aura and shot straight through the air. It went straight for the defensive line of the ink cloud guards. Ding ding dang dang. In front of the unparalleled sharpness of the calamity sword, countless weapons had no room to fight back and broke one after another. Fresh blood splashed out from the chests of the ink cloud guards. In just an instant 7 or 8 bodies flew out, tumbling left and right. There were also whooshing sounds. Those were pieces of flesh that had been cut off by Chuyang. Chuyang only felt a chill on his shoulder, and a large piece of his flesh flew out just like that. A sword suddenly shot out horizontally. It was powerful and heavy. Chuyang didn't stop at all. Maintaining the momentum of flying, He shook his hand and used the move, one ray of cold light pierces 10,000 fathoms. Thousands of cold lights flashed out. That ink cloud guard had no room to resist at all. He fell down without a sound and blood splattered all over his body. Due to the urgency of time, Chu Yang didn't use the latest calamity sword technique that the sword spirit had practiced recently. Although the sword technique was more powerful, he hadn't really comprehended it yet after all. If he used it rashly, there would definitely be some delay. And now there was no room for any delay. Therefore, Chu Yang used the move that he was already familiar with. But the moment he used it, he immediately realized that the power of the sword technique now was far from what it had been in the past. Its power had increased to an extent that Chu Yang could never have imagined before. It must be known that although Chu Yang had not completely comprehended the new fused sword moves, his understanding of the original moves had unknowingly improved by another level. Although there was only a difference of one level, the difference in power was like the difference between heaven and earth. Puff, 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 Chu Yang's body didn't stop at all. He rushed forward like a hurricane. At this moment he didn't know what injuries and fatigue were. There was only one thought in his mind: charge out. I must charge out. The battle had only been going on for a short while, but he didn't know how many enemies he had encountered, how many he had killed, and how many weapons he had broken. The people behind him followed closely. The shadows on both sides constantly hacked at them with swords and sabers at lightning speed. This team that was charging out was also constantly losing members. As long as someone's leg was injured, he would immediately leave the team and charge toward the opponent who had injured him. He would explode and die. With two clangs, two broken swords suddenly flew up into the sky. Two burly figures staggered back to the sides. Chu Yang roared and rushed forward in a straight line. There was only one ink cloud guard left in front of him, the last one. Chapter 1972. Seeing Chu Yang rushing up like a madman, this ink cloud guard couldn't help but feel a burst of inexplicable fear. He leaned to the side and actually made way for Chu Yang. Chu Yang suddenly felt empty in front of him. He had actually rushed out of the encirclement. Bastard! Why didn't you stop him? Why did you dodge? Are you afraid of that person? The two ink cloud guards who were staggering back roared loudly. Before they could stop their momentum of retreat, they had already seen Chu Yang break through the last line of defense. They couldn't help but roar and scold angrily. That ink cloud guard seemed to have woken up from a dream at this point. He shouted wildly and turned to chase, but he was swarmed by the people of the two big sections. Each person chopped him into meat paste with a sword. Everyone, follow me closely. Chu Yang didn't even turn his head as he shouted. His body was still dripping with blood as he rushed into the forest on the opposite side. Behind him, everyone tried their best to catch up. This group of people sneaked into the dense forest like a whirlwind. In the distance, a strong wind wrapped in flames swept over overwhelmingly. In front of the flames were Meng Wuya and his subordinates. Everyone was rushing over here as fast as a meteor. On the left and right sides, there were also countless figures rushing over. In less than 30 breaths of time, it was the difference between life and death. Where's Chu Yang? Where is he? Someone asked angrily. Hiss. Some people looked at the tragic scene and sucked in a breath of cold air. In any case, Chu Yang had finally broken through this death blockade and left without a second thought. The best and most dangerous deadlock was broken. The ink cloud guards and the silver-armored soldiers didn't hesitate too much. They immediately split up. First, more than 100 people chased after, and then more than 1,000 people chased after them one after another after asking about the situation. After another half an incense stick of time, Meng Wuya finally arrived. Where is he? Meng Wuya asked angrily. He escaped. An inky cloud guard commander lowered his head in shame. There were more than a dozen sword wounds on his body that hadn't been bandaged yet. Blood was flowing out of all of them. Every sword wound was so deep that the bones could be seen. If this commander's cultivation hadn't reached the peak of the celestial being level, he would have died from his serious injuries. Escape? How did he escape? Meng Wuya couldn't believe what was happening in front of his eyes. It was obviously a death trap. How could he have escaped? Things have changed too suddenly. Our 5,000 people have formed a huge net. They came to outflank Chu Yang's group, but because they were too scattered, they didn't have time to regroup. In the first round, 40 to 50 people self-detonated at the same time. A path was blasted open. In the end, that ink cloud guard commander was ashamed, heartbroken, and dejected. In a very short time, Meng Wuya checked the situation at the scene, and after looking at it, he let out a long sigh. They're all the corpses of our own people. There isn't even a single corpse over there. At most, there are only some broken limbs. Meng Wuya's voice was filled with sincere respect. They're really thorough, General. These people must have gone mad. It's as if they don't care about their own lives. That Ink Cloud Guard commander's body swayed. Finally, he couldn't support himself and fell to the ground. Facing such an enemy, we are completely helpless. Conventional battle tactics are completely useless and we can't avoid them. We can only use our own bodies to resist. So many brothers sacrificed themselves like this. The situation at that time was really too tragic. How many people did we lose in this battle? Meng Wuya asked. Ink Cloud Guard, 170 people died. 35 silver-armored soldiers. That Ink Cloud Guard commander smiled bitterly. More than 200 brothers died just like that. It only took half a cup of tea's time from beginning to end. Meng Wuya sighed deeply. At that time, 10,000 people had followed him out. So far, close to 1,000 had been lost. Although more than 10% of the targeted enemies had been killed, the remaining people were probably more difficult to deal with. As a general, what kind of enemies were the most difficult to deal with? Calm enemies, cruel enemies, enemies with brains, enemies with wisdom and so on. Enemies who were not afraid of death, without a doubt, could always be listed in the top 3 of this list. Meng Wuya was silent for a while. He looked at the soldiers beside him. I brought these people out. In the future, how many of them can safely return with me? And how many of them will be buried here forever? He said silently, Chase. No matter what, things had come to this point. There was no turning back and there was no turning back. Chu Yang couldn't and he couldn't either. At this moment, Chu Yang's whole body was almost rotten. Since that unavoidable battle in the dense forest, the battles had been one after another. He didn't know when he would encounter a group of people. After a battle, he would fight desperately and finally break out of the encirclement and escape. Then, not long after, he would encounter another group of people again. It continued like this as if it had become some kind of cycle. The pursuit was like a drizzle in the sky, a continuous rain in autumn. Once it started, it would be endless and never stop. Now it was raining and the ground was fighting. The rain continued to fall and the battles continued one after another. Chu Yang could only guarantee one thing now. He would use all means to not be surrounded by the enemy. But encountering a battle was destined to be unavoidable. It was a situation that he had to face. Compared to the others, Chu Yang's body was undoubtedly the most injured. Although his cultivation was not the highest among them, he had to rush to the front. This was because he was now the soul of this team. If Chu Yang had not been rushing forward and opening a path, these people would have been in despair. Only Chu Yang could give these people a subtle feeling of, we still have hope. Roughly estimating, the injuries on Chu Yang's body in these few days were at least 400 to 500. 400 to 500. This was a shocking number. And Chu Yang had used 4 incomplete versions of the heavy pills so far. If it wasn't for the surging spiritual energy in his body that continuously healed his wounds and increased his physical strength, even if Chu Yang had 100 heavy pills, they would have been used up long ago. Fortune and misfortune depended on each other, and misfortune hid within each other. The fusion of the tribulation space and the divine palace of the medicine king caused the extreme backflow of spiritual energy, causing the tribulation space to be temporarily sealed. This caused Chu Yang to lose his biggest life-saving trump card, but it also provided Chu Yang with another near-perpetual source of spiritual energy, supporting Chu Yang's eternal source of power. Now, the way everyone looked at Chu Yang changed again. It was as if they were looking at a high mountain, or it should be said that they were looking at a demon. They had never seen anyone who could fight like this. Or simply using the word fight was not enough to describe the terrifying extent of his state. It seemed as if Chu Yang couldn't be beaten to death. He had rushed out of the forest of swords and sabers a moment ago. His entire body was covered in blood, and he was on the verge of death. But, the next moment he would be full of energy and would enter the next wave of battle in perfect condition. Once again he was covered in wounds. Then he fled for his life again. Once again he participated in the battle. He was still the first to charge and take the lead, not to mention that he was made of flesh. Even if he was made of iron, he would have already fallen apart by now. But Chu Yang actually hadn't fallen yet. It seemed that he could still persist. Perhaps he could persist for a long time or even forever. Everyone was first surprised, then amazed, then horrified, then admired, and finally worshipped him. After continuing to flee like this, there were only 50 people left with Chu Yang. The last 50 people. Other than the 3 who disobeyed the order and were beheaded in public, The rest of the team of 200 people had already fallen on the road of being hunted down and turned into a shocking explosion, filling the sky with flesh and blood. However, along the way more than 100 ink cloud guards and more than 400 silver-armored soldiers had also fallen here, becoming cold corpses that shared the spring. Just these few days of chasing, including the encounter at the beginning, Mo Yunqian's people had already paid an expensive price of no less than 1,300 people. Such a high price made Meng Wuya's heart ache so much that he was trembling. This made all the ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers gnash their teeth and fight even harder. Under such a mentality, it led to the subsequent battles becoming more and more dangerous. Even the 50 people who were still able to escape with Chu Yang were all covered with cuts and bruises. Not a single one of them could be found unscathed. Now, at this moment, the only thing that could still support everyone to persevere was Chu Yang's indomitable fighting spirit. Poof! Chu Yang plunged into a puddle. He didn't care how turbid and dirty the water in the puddle was. He just opened his mouth and gulped down mouthfuls of water. The tribulation space couldn't be opened. The fresh water resources that Chu Yang had never seen as a problem had been completely used up for a long time. The continuous autumn rain was like the continuous sorrow of spring. Puddles after puddles gathered on the ground. The water in each puddle had an earthy yellow color, with unknown things floating on top. The 50 people just supported each other like this, lying in the puddles and gulping down mouthfuls of water. Hunger was nothing to first-rate experts like them. However, thirst was something that all experts and powerhouses could not lack. Especially when they had lost a large amount of blood from the continuous attacks. Countless silt and turbid water rushed into their stomachs together. Chapter 1973. Once the time limit was exceeded, there was a possibility that he would never have to walk again in this lifetime. Go! Chu Yang, who was so tired that he had buried his head in dirty water, suddenly jumped up and issued an order. School www.gunCom leave? Everyone smiled bitterly. Could he still walk? Everyone wanted to leave, but if they didn't, it would mean that they were inching closer and closer to death. But their physical and mental exhaustion made everyone feel like they were better off dead than alive. They truly felt that it would be better to die here than to continue fleeing without any hope. Some of them even planned to turn around and kill a few of their pursuers. At the very least, they wouldn't have to face the seemingly endless pursuit of the Grim Reaper. His throat, his stomach, and his entire internal organs seemed to be on fire. Chu Yang hesitated for a moment. Then he took out a big bowl from his ring. He scooped a bowl of muddy soup from the ground, and then took out an incomplete version of the heavy pill. Suddenly, a fragrant aroma filled everyone's nostrils. Everyone's Adam's apple trembled up and down, and their eyes shot out a sincere desire. Chu Yang was silent for a moment. Then he crushed the heavy pill, which was emitting a sweet fragrance at this moment, and completely dissolved it into the bowl of murky water. Chu Yang raised the bowl and said in a low voice, "Come, each of you will have a mouthful. The main thing is, don't drink it all in one gulp." Everyone was shocked and looked at each other in dismay. This was a life-saving medicine. Everyone was experienced in the Jianghu, so they naturally understood. However, at that moment, although everyone was yearning for it, they were also hesitating. Should I drink it? Can I drink it? I drank it. Was it still useful? Chu Yang moved closer to a person, but this person's reaction was to tilt his head away. He said, "You drink first. You drink first. No, you drink first." In the face of life-saving medicine, no one was willing to make the first move. Chu Yang's eyes were a little moist. He cleared his throat and said in a low voice, "Brothers, all the brothers who have survived, we have more than 150 brothers who have fallen here, and they have given their all without any regrets. He used up all of his life force just to give us a chance to escape. They were all like that." With a boom, they turned into smoke. "Don't tell me you want their deaths to be in vain? No matter what, we have to hold on and give it our all. Carry on with this impossible escape until we escape with our lives. There's some medicine in this bowl of water. Drink it and you'll have more strength. Everyone take a small sip. It should be enough." Chu Yang took a deep breath and said, "Everyone here is experienced in Jianghu. We can totally calculate how many people can drink this bowl of water." He only needed to drink his own mouthful. Wouldn't it be better for everyone to escape together? Even if it's not for ourselves, we have to think about those who died for us, and the people they entrusted to us. They died for us. We have to live for them and try our best to live on. Under Chu Yang's earnest and well-intentioned urging, everyone's hands and lips trembled. He took a sip. A small bite. Then, everyone clearly felt that their bodies, which had been completely dried up before, suddenly burst into a raging fire. In an instant, the energy that had disappeared started to gather again bit by bit and gradually grew. No one dared to drink too much of such a miraculous medicine, because there was definitely not a lot of this medicine. It could be seen from how much Chu Yang treasured it. After the 50 people drank it, the big bowl returned to Chu Yang's hands. There was still a small half of it left. Chu Yang's heart ached. He took out a small jade bottle from his ring and carefully poured this half bowl of murky water into it. He carefully put it away. Everyone's eyes sparkled as they watched Chu Yang carefully put away this small half bowl of water. At this moment, something called hope inexplicably rose from the bottom of everyone's eyes. There's still some of this medicine left. Next time, everyone should take a small sip. It should be able to hold on one more time. After 2 more times, maybe we can escape with our lives. Go. Chu Yang ordered again. The 50 people moved at the same time. In the misty autumn rain, their bodies were covered in mud and they moved towards the vast unknown fate. Chu Yang didn't know how many days had passed. Ever since he started to escape, he seemed to have lost track of time. What was daytime? What was night? He couldn't tell. It was as if these were no longer important. He only knew that ever since it started to rain, he was constantly being chased. Along the way, Chu Yang had already lost count of how many battles he had encountered. Because this was also not important. The only important thing was to break out of the encirclement and survive. After breaking out of the encirclement once again, Elder Bai Yuchen lost an arm. She only realized this after breaking out of the encirclement. Regarding this, Bai Yuchen said self-deprecatingly, "In the past, when I read some legendary novels, there would always be a battle where someone would be stabbed by a sword. After that, the battle would start again. Now I know that those are all lies." As Bai Yuchen watched Che Shuchu bandage her wound, she said self-deprecatingly, "In a battle like this, one's eyes are already red. The only thing they know is to charge out. Why would they care if they're missing a part of their body? If I was killed at that time, I would have died in such a muddle-headed way. In fact, if I really had time to think about other things, I think I would have already self-destructed. Without an arm, my fighting power would be greatly reduced. But now I don't have such thoughts. What's the big deal about losing an arm? I still have an arm and a right hand that can hold a sword. It doesn't matter." Chu Yang couldn't help but laugh and said, "Elder Bai's words are really interesting. However, being injured and screaming is a natural reaction as a living being. It's impossible that it doesn't exist. It's just that it's rare for us to fight so selflessly. A highly concentrated battle consciousness automatically ignores the basic senses of the human body." Everyone laughed hoarsely. Along the way, they had been trembling in fear and despair at the beginning. Those negative feelings were slowly disappearing bit by bit. By now, everyone was already indifferent to life and death. Chu Yang used all his intelligence and thought of countless ways to get rid of the pursuers. Escaping from death again and again slowly trained these people's nerves to be incomparably tough. From the grief of seeing their comrades die at the beginning, to the numbness and indifference now. Occasionally they would even make a few jokes. This wasn't heartless but really indifferent. Maybe next time I'll be lying there like them. It seemed like there was really nothing to be sad about. Chu Yang was also calculating his own strength. Now he was left with the last 30 people. Every time he encountered a battle, he would lose a few people. It's just that the recent few times the number of casualties had decreased. It seemed that the pursuers were gradually getting tired. And the pursuers didn't have a heaven-defying treasure like his incomplete version of heavy pills. However, Chu Yang's incomplete version of the heavy pill was only left with one last pill. If he still needed to use it, then he could only use the super heavy pills. If all these things were used up, he wouldn't have any left. At that time, even if he was injured, he could only wait for death. Villa Master Chu. Chu Yang was deep in thought. Suddenly he heard Bai Yuchen call out. "Oh?" Chu Yang turned his head. "I want to say a few words." Bai Yuchen smiled, then his face became serious. "This is also what we all want to say. We've been through life and death together for so long. At this moment, I really feel uncomfortable if I don't say it." Chu Yang sat up straight. He said seriously, "Please speak. These days we've all seen it. Villa Master Chu. You're really a person who can do great things." Bai Yuchen said, "Every time we fought, you were always at the forefront. Every strategy and plan came from your hands. If it weren't for Villa Master Chu, we would have been annihilated more than once by Mo Yuntian's huge army. We might have been annihilated the first time or even the second time. However, It is precisely Villa Master Chu that has brought us step by step and forcibly withstood it all. This old man can say this responsibly, looking at the current world except for Villa Master Chu. If it was anyone else, even if it was Emperor 1, Empress 1, or even His Majesty the Holy Monarch, if they were in the same situation now, they would definitely not do better than Villa Master Chu. At this point, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. And looking at Chu Yang, their eyes were full of trust and passion. All along we've been the ones protecting others. There has never been anyone like Villa Master Chu who would protect us in such a meticulous manner, leading us forward. So, Villa Master Chu is now the person I, Bai Yu Qin, respect the most. You're also the person I, Bai Yu Qin, admire the most in my life. We don't have much time. Here I'll make it short. Bai Yu Qin's eyes were burning. He interrupted Chu Yang's words. If we can't escape death in the end, then we can die without regrets. To die under Villa Master Chu's leadership, we won't have any complaints. We'll even feel honored. But if we can escape alive in the end, then we won't go back to Mo Yintian anymore. We want to follow Villa Master Chu from now on and do great things together. Although Bai Yu Chen's voice was low, it was powerful. We also want to see what kind of achievements a person like Villa Master Chu can achieve in the end. We hope that Villa Master Chu will accept the loyalty of us defeated soldiers. From now on, I, Bai Yu Chen, will only be loyal to Villa Master Chu Yang in this world. Bai Yu Chen raised his remaining hand and swore solemnly. Chapter 1974. The others had the same reaction. They looked at Chu Yang with the same fervor and trust. Chu Yang's performance these days had already conquered everyone here, including many who had already died in battle. Which leader could share weal and woe with his subordinates like this? When a leader was with his subordinates, would he charge at the front and enjoy at the back? And which leader could be like Chu Yang, never yielding in any adversity and never giving up? Fighting all the time? Fighting all the time on the front line. Although he had always been on the run. This is from P. Although his strength was still very weak. However, if such a person is not worthy of your loyalty, then who is? Even Chu Yang himself didn't realize that Bai Yu Chen and the others had been speaking to him more and more respectfully recently. Originally, when they were talking to Chu Yang, everyone had straightened their backs and raised their necks. But recently they had already bent their backs slightly, lowered their heads and spoke humbly. And this kind of action had gradually become a habit, a subconscious action. In the past they used to address Chu Yang as Villa Master Chu Kamayu, or Villa Master Sir. But now they had automatically changed to you. Today at this moment, they had even directly expressed their loyalty. This was a very short period of time in reality, but the process seemed to be very long. Even Chu Yang himself did not deliberately do anything, nor did he pay attention to anything. But it was so natural that it had reached this step. Everyone stood up neatly and bowed. Villa Master, please accept our loyalty. Previously they had no way out and could only rely on Chu Yang. At that time, their hearts were filled with unwillingness. But now they were filled with eagerness that Chu Yang could agree to their loyalty wholeheartedly. Chu Yang's heart warmed. He said, "Don't tell me that after this you don't want to go back to Black Cloud Sky? You must know that your families and your businesses are still in Black Cloud Sky. If you stay here like this, we can't go back anymore. Or rather, whether we can survive or not is another matter." Bai Yu Chen said sadly, "Now we have no way out. It's rare to find someone worthy of our loyalty. Please accept our request." Chu Yang was not pretentious either. In this period of time he was also sincerely moved by these people. He said solemnly, "Since that's the case, then let's carve out a new world together. It's still too early to say anything now. I can only say that when we get out of this crisis, or when we achieve greater things in the future, I will let all of you go home in glory. There will definitely be a day when all of you return home in glory. Gloriously, even Black Cloud Heavenly Emperor will not dare to do anything to you guys. But such a goal we need to work together. Create it together." Chu Yang's eyes flashed like lightning. "Since you want to be loyal to me, then from now on, this is my first order. Manor Lord, please instruct us." Everyone stood up straight. "Don't use the word death lightly at any time." Chu Yang took a deep breath. "You must know. At the very least, when you said the word die, you were still alive. If you're not, then die." "Yes." Villa Master's teachings, everyone agreed in a low voice. Death, however, was only a single word. But if it was said from the mouth for a long time, then when encountering a major calamity, they would naturally give up resistance from the bottom of their hearts. Even if your hands were still fighting, if your heart had no hope, how could you still live on? This was a psychological problem. Actually, there were quite a number of people who sacrificed previously. They might not have no strength to fight again, but they would rather choose a quick death. It was because their hopes were no longer on themselves, and they were all entrusted to others. This way they also lost the motivation to work hard to live on, intentionally or unintentionally. As for more systematic things, Chuyang did not know either. But he knew one thing: as long as you still wanted to live on and had a very strong desire to live on, then there would definitely be a way to survive. Heavens, there was no dead end. Another few days passed. The rain still did not stop. Furthermore, there was still a trend of getting heavier and heavier. Chuyang and the rest were already exhausted to the peak. It was another 7 to 8 battles in a row. But these few battles, there actually did not appear to be casualties. This was simply somewhat inconceivable in the eyes of Bai Yuchen and the rest. We are made of flesh and blood, and so are the enemies. Chuyang revealed the essence of the matter with one sentence. We are tired, but they are even more tired. Because the work they have to do is far more than what we have to do. And we only need to run as we wish. As long as it is not within their expectations, we can fly freely in the sky. Another point is also very important. We are running for our own lives, but they are chasing us to complete the mission given to them by others. This is the fundamental difference. If this situation continues, as long as we don't die and continue to run, then we can even drag these 10,000 people to death and tire them to death. Perhaps we can even kill a saint-level expert in the end. Chuyang laughed. Everyone also relaxed and laughed. Their laughter was actually quite pleasant. Everyone knew that dragging and exhausting the enemy to death was absolutely impossible. As for killing a saint-level expert, that was even more nonsense. But there was no doubt that Chuyang's words were very satisfying. Everyone felt a heartfelt sense of comfort in their hearts. It was as if they had already seen those ink cloud guards being dragged and exhausted to death, and even that old fellow Meng Wuya dying. In everyone's imagination, although Meng Wuya, who had been reduced to a state of death, would not really die, he was really suffering during this period of time. He really had a taste of what it meant to be badly battered. Since the encounter in the forest, it was not only the beginning of a nightmare for Chuyang and the rest, it was also the beginning of a nightmare for Meng Wuya. After that battle, it began to rain. Then everything entered an unknown state. Originally, they thought that as long as they locked onto Chuyang and the rest and caught up to them, then Chuyang and the rest would not be able to escape. At least in the hearts of the people of Ink Cloud Sky, whether it was the Ink Cloud Guards, the Silver Armored Guards, or even Meng Wuya himself, they all thought so. 10,000 people against 100 people, and everyone's cultivation was about the same. The other side even had a saint-level expert like Meng Wuya holding the line. If there were still any accidents, then they might as well bang their head and die. However, the outcome of the matter proved that Meng Wuya was the one who should bang his head and die. They used all the means that they could use, encircling, intercepting, ambushing, and so on. However, Chuyang was always able to find the weakest link and break out of the encirclement. Then, the cycle repeated again and again, spiraling back and forth. Every time there would be casualties on Chuyang's side, but the problem was that there would also be casualties on Meng Wuya's side. After dozens of consecutive battles, the Ink Cloud Sky soldiers that had a total of 10,000 people had now been reduced to less than 5,000 people. More than 3,500 experts had disappeared just like that. The casualties were actually more than 10 times that of the other side. And that damned culprit Chuyang, how he should escape was still how he should escape. Clearly, they had already felt that this group of people had collapsed to the extreme in the previous moment, but the next moment, they were still able to charge over energetically. Originally, they thought that even if they had to endure, they would be able to make these people collapse. But now, it seemed that the final result was very likely that everyone would collapse together. It was also possible that the people on their side would collapse first before the other side did. The only impossible thing was that before their side collapsed, the other side would collapse first. Why was it impossible? They really did not know what kind of evil method that Chuyang had used. Although that group of people died less and less, each one of them was actually becoming more and more difficult to deal with. And they could clearly feel that these people's mental endurance and mental toughness were actually getting higher and higher. Not risking their lives for despair but persevering for hope. This could not go on. Meng Wuya furrowed his brows and pondered. He felt that his usually clear mind was now like a pile of paste. Kong Zi grasped a tyrannical strength that was hundreds of times stronger than the other side, enough to crush the other side, but he was still unable to use it completely. If he only pursued from one side, the other side could relax and run. If he attacked from two sides, this kind of opportunity was too little. If he attacked from four sides, not to mention that the opportunity was too little, there would definitely be a weak point. If the other side attacked the weak point with all their strength, as long as they broke through, they could escape far away. If he wanted to completely encircle the other side like an iron bucket, such an opportunity simply did not exist. That damn Chu Yang did not know what kind of medicine he ate, but he could always detect his intentions in advance. He was simply not a human but a demon, a monster. If he was not injured, then he could have wiped out these guys in one fell swoop by himself, and he would not have to bear any losses. But that damned soul tribulation had left him too serious of an injury. Although it was not fatal, it had fundamentally eliminated the possibility of him personally taking action. Once he took action by force, the only result would be the collapse of his meridians and death. This kind of situation was really depressing. If he used the flying boat, the target would be too obvious. As long as the other side saw the flying boat circling, they would immediately know his plan, and it would be even more impossible to succeed. Meng Wuya, who was at his wits' end, was in a dilemma. Leading so many people to constantly roll and fight in the mud every day, this was not something an ordinary person could do. Every time he saw the resentful eyes of his subordinates as well as their tired bodies, Meng Wuya felt great pressure. "Sai, I can't surround them, I can't catch up, the flying boat can't be used, the flying boat, huh? The flying boat." Meng Wuya was in a state of melancholy, but suddenly his mind flashed and his eyes lit up. Then he stood up with a schwa sound, "Pass down my order." Chapter 1975. Among the people around Chu Yang, almost half of them were at the celestial being level. This is from P. But at this moment, everyone was a little shocked by this situation. When they broke through to the celestial being level, there wasn't such a big movement. Wasn't this movement a little too big? But the next moment, Chu Yang let out a long cry and shouted, "Meng Wuya!" Boom. When he shouted this, the dantian in his body suddenly swelled and exploded at the same time. All the spiritual energy instantly gathered into a ball, rumbling and rotating in his body. The clouds in the sky seemed to be undergoing some special changes. However, no one noticed the subtle change. How could there be no clouds in the pouring rain? Above the cumulonimbus clouds, countless dark clouds rushed over at lightning speed. In the blink of an eye, they formed a thick cloud with a strong destructive aura. Heavenly punishment. That's right, it was heavenly punishment. The dark clouds in the sky continued to gather, forming a huge eye in the sky. But this eye was formed above the cumulonimbus clouds. The awe-inspiring power of heaven and earth was contained but not released, so no one noticed it except for the person involved, Chu Yang. Heavenly punishment didn't exist at all in Chu Yang's previous breakthroughs. That was because his tribulation space carried the power of someone who surpassed heavenly punishment. Unless the level of heavenly punishment exceeded the creator of the tribulation space, it would never be able to affect him. But now, the tribulation space couldn't be opened and was closed in disguise. Chu Yang's breakthrough this time inevitably attracted heavenly punishment. For ordinary people, there was only one heavenly punishment when they broke through. The eye of heaven, thunder and lightning flashed. Those who went against heaven must be punished by heavenly punishment. But Chu Yang's breakthrough attracted heavenly punishment at once. This naturally had a lot to do with his dantian. Chu Yang was the first to realize that his breakthrough had attracted the heavenly punishment. Moreover, he had attracted so many of them in one go. But at this moment, instead of being shocked, he was happy. He wanted to fight desperately after the breakthrough, but now it seemed that there was another way to go. If he encountered heavenly punishment on the road to death, would it be a positive? "Once I rush over, immediately break out of the encirclement. Go as far as you can. Don't worry about me, do you hear me?" Chu Yang said in a deep voice. "Manor Lord." Everyone turned pale with fright. "If you still regard me as the Manor Lord, then I'll be the Manor Lord. Listen to my orders." Chu Yang said, "Leave behind the secret signal that we've arranged beforehand. If I can escape, I'll naturally look for you at the first moment. Don't come to the place where I'm at. I already have a plan to escape. Do you understand what I'm saying?" "Yes." Chu Yang laughed heartily. Suddenly he leaped out and stood on top of the tree. He shouted, "Who wants to kill me? Who dares to kill me? Who can kill me?" His laughter was a kind of arrogant attitude that showed disdain for the world. All of a sudden it exploded. Bai Yu Qin and the others looked at Chu Yang with great reverence, and then quietly retreated. Chu Yang had already attracted everyone's attention. Everyone was gathering around him. At this moment, under the cover of Chu Yang's powerful breakthrough, the torrential rain and the escape of Bai Yuchen and the others did not attract anyone's attention. This was because everyone's attention was already focused on Chu Yang. Chu Yang. He was the ultimate culprit. He was also everyone's primary goal in coming to the Eastern Royal Heavens this time. Heads surged like waves rolling in from all directions. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Countless people leaped onto the treetops and faced Chu Yang. Although they did not know why Chu Yang was the only one left here and did not know where the others had gone. But as long as they caught Chu Yang, they would have completed their mission. As for the others, without Chu Yang leading them, they would definitely not be able to do anything. It was only a matter of time before they were all killed. Even if all of them escaped, it would not matter. The most difficult one to deal with was still Chu Yang alone. Chu Yang faced the huge army with his hands behind his back. There was a faint smile on his face as he stood in the wind. Although Chu Yang was alone at this moment, his demeanor at this moment made everyone admire him, regardless of whether they were enemies or allies. His clothes were already in tatters. Rather than saying that he was wearing them, it was more accurate to say that they were hanging on his body. He was covered in mud and blood and looked extremely pathetic. But when he stood on top of the tree with his hands behind his back, he looked like an emperor who controlled the world and was patrolling his territory. He had no regard for anything and everything. There was an indescribable domineering power and an indescribable ease. There was an indescribable sense of transcendence. Meng Wuya stepped out of the crowd and looked at Chu Yang. This was the second time they met after such a short period of time. Finally, this young genius had miscalculated. He had finally trapped him here, leaving him with no way out. The legend had been written. Was today the end of the chapter? Jiang, this is the second time we have met. It seems that this matter should be over. Meng Wuya let out a long sigh. I'm very sorry, and I'm also very sorry. You're such a peerless genius. If you were given another 100 years, I'm sure it would be difficult to find anyone who could contend with you. The meaning behind the heartfelt praise was tantamount to announcing the end of Chu Yang's life today. Without a future, what was the meaning of a high evaluation? Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, "It should be over?" Is that true? I don't think so. Especially after hearing your praise for me, my will to live has become even stronger. Meng Wuya smiled, "You won't have the chance. In such a situation you can only face my 1,000-strong army alone. Almost every one of their cultivation is not weaker than yours. Could it be that you still have the power to turn the situation around? Do you think that you are that undying divine soul?" Chu Yang, don't put up any unnecessary resistance. To be honest, we don't want to make things difficult for you and we don't want to kill you either. As long as you're willing to surrender, we can give you the best treatment on the way back to Moyun Sky. We'll let your last journey in life be more relaxed and happy. Meng Wuya said sincerely, "I believe that you can trust me on this point. I really don't doubt this. But what about after I reach Moyun Sky? What will the result be?" Chu Yang smiled faintly and said, "Everything still has to end, right?" At this point, everyone was speechless. Could it be that you still have delusions of having a way out after seeing the Lord Heavenly Emperor? The fact that we didn't make things difficult for you on the way back is already a huge risk. And this is still on the account that you are a real man, giving you an exceptional treatment. Otherwise, just for the sake of countless comrades dying in your hands, you won't be able to have an easy journey. It will definitely make your life worse than death. You actually still have delusions of wanting more. You really don't know what's good for you and you really don't know what's good for you. The wind whistled. Everyone realized that the wind between heaven and earth. It seemed to have become bigger in an instant. The wind suddenly grew stronger and the entire mountain forest creaked. It was the sound of countless large trees being blown to the side by the sudden increase in the wind, and they were on the verge of snapping. However, no matter how strong the wind was. However, the trees on which everyone was standing were still motionless. Other than the sudden increase in the wind, the rain in the sky also became thicker and thicker. There were also clouds. The clouds in the sky also seemed to be getting lower and lower. "Thank you for your kindness, General. I will not surrender without a fight." Chu Yang smiled and said softly. His voice was low and hoarse, but it was filled with awe. He slowly raised his head. The cold determination in his eyes was the opposite of the indifference in his tone. Meng Wuya couldn't help but be startled and his expression became serious. Then Chu Yang's voice suddenly grew louder. "Only the Chu Yang who died in battle. The Chu Yang who will never give up." In the cold voice, Chu Yang's body was like an arrow leaving the bow. He left the top of the tree and swooped down, bringing with him a stream of light. He rushed into the crowd. After he left, the big tree under him was broken by the strong wind with a kacha sound. The magnificent sword energy of the Calamity Sword surged out. The two enemies who were directly in front of him screamed miserably as they were split into 4 parts. He made his move. Facing more than 1,000 enemies in front of him, Chu Yang still chose to take the initiative to attack. 1 sword against 1,000. In such a desperate situation, he was like a lone hero who would never admit defeat, standing up and fighting fearlessly. However, 1 sword against 1,000 was a choice, but 1 sword against 1,000 was the result he hoped for. This result was too difficult to achieve. Chu Yang's voice grew louder and louder. From loud to roaring. I will never admit defeat. Chu Yang laughed wildly and his body flashed like a ghost. The few ink cloud guards closest to him almost didn't have time to react, and there was already a lot of blood spurting out of their bodies. In this world I have never submitted to anyone. Not in the past, not now, and not in the future. Chu Yang took 3 steps forward, and his hand sword slashed 3 times consecutively. What harm was there in slaughtering the world? More than a dozen figures tumbled and spun out. If you want to catch me, show me your ability. If you want to kill me, pay the price. Even if I can't beat you, you still have to spit out 3 mouthfuls of blood for me. I am Chu Yang. I was once a minister and also known as the King of Hell. Starting from the grassroots, competing in the smoke of war, every step was difficult, every step was life and death. I was at the end of the road more than once. I died and lived, but I still strengthened myself. From nothing to now facing a Sky Emperor, even if I can't beat him, I am still Chu Yang. Still fighting the world sword test again. Meng Wuya, let's see how many lives you can take out to be buried with me. Chu Yang roared loudly. The long sword in his hand suddenly burst out with thousands of cold rays. The real, complete first sword of the Calamity Sword technique. Under such extreme pressure, in such an extremely disadvantageous situation, Chu Yang successfully executed half a move. Although it was only half a move, countless screams and wails could be heard. Chapter 1976. Although Chu Yang had yet to pass the heavenly punishment, he already had the strength of a heaven-level expert. Moreover, this strength was at least twice as strong as a peak Deva-level expert. With such strength and the support of the world's #1 divine weapon, the Calamity Sword, as well as a supreme sword technique like the Calamity Sword technique, it was easy to destroy opponents of the same level. Just now, by chance, the final move of the Calamity Sword technique had a great effect. Not only did it exceed Deva Mo Yun's imagination, it even exceeded Chu Yang's own expectations. The power of 1 sword had actually killed more than 50 enemies. The power of 1 move was actually so great. Meng Wuya watched as Chu Yang dashed left and right in front of his army. It was as if he had entered a no-man's land. No one was his match. Especially the power of his last sword move. It was frightening. It was shocking. Meng Wuya sighed. Then it became dignified. Then it became respectful. Such an enemy was worthy of anyone's respect. And the greatest respect for such an enemy was to use all one's strength to kill him. Meng Wuya said in a deep voice, "Kill him with all your might." The strength that Chu Yang had displayed so far had greatly exceeded Meng Wuya's expectations. It was not weaker than a peak Deva-level expert. In other words, the power of Chu Yang's sword had reached the level of a half-step saint. If possible, Meng Wuya would rather do it himself, but with his current injuries he was powerless to do so. He could only use the human wave tactic to encircle and annihilate Chu Yang. With a command, everyone moved at the same time. There were more than 300 people in this wave. Countless saber light and sword energy flew toward Chu Yang in a crisscrossing manner. Come on. Chu Yang laughed wildly. The Calamity Sword rumbled and the sword roared like a dragon. Hundreds of majestic sword energy flew like dragons in the sky. Every one of them collided head-on. At this moment, the huge amount of spiritual energy that had gathered in his body and had nowhere to vent was completely released in this sword. Boom! With a deafening bang, the sword chi on the battlefield intertwined and turned into a ball of blazing white light. Everyone present couldn't see anything and felt a stinging pain in their eyes. In great shock, they all turned around and retreated one after another. Chu Yang is facing hundreds of experts by himself. But he is still able to fight to such an extent? It was truly shocking. Without exception, a small chip appeared on the weapons of everyone who participated in the battle. Wow! Chu Yang's body suffered a severe backlash from the thousands of sword energies. He spouted out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Then he flew high up in the sky like a kite with its string cut. He somersaulted dozens of times and soared high into the sky. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the rolling figure. Everyone's eyes were filled with pity. This included the ink cloud guards who had never considered anything else. Everyone knew that even if Chu Yang didn't die after this attack, he wouldn't have the slightest power to fight back. The path of this hero who never gave up had come to an end. Once his body landed, it would be time to capture him in one fell swoop. This should be Chu Yang's final madness. However, Chu Yang's body continued to roll until he reached a big tree. Then he suddenly straightened his waist and ferociously kicked the tree trunk with his feet. Crack. A tree that was over 1,000 feet tall, so big that it would take dozens of people to wrap their arms around it, was snapped off from the tree. The top half of the tree crown flew out like a huge umbrella. It was as if it was floating in the air and flew out hundreds of feet. Chu Yang's body left the treetops with a loud roar and soared into the sky. He slowly flew toward the clouds in the sky. Roar! Chu Yang roared toward the sky, and his whole body's aura exploded. Hissing and roaring sounds were mixed with a mouthful of blood spurting out. A ferocious burst of energy and an intense aura of a breakthrough instantly filled the heavens. Breakthrough? He actually broke through? Meng Wuya's face suddenly changed. As a profound cultivator, he was really confused at this moment. How could this be? How did Chu Yang suddenly make a breakthrough after that world-destroying blow? What was going on? Chu Yang already had such strength now. After breaking through, wouldn't it mean that he would at least have the strength of a saint? However, Meng Wuya had overestimated Chu Yang. In fact, Chu Yang's strength had increased greatly due to his breakthrough. And this process could be described as a sudden increase in strength. He had used his strength to defeat the enemy, and then received the heavenly punishment. It wasn't as exaggerated as Meng Wuya had imagined. However, the heavenly punishment caused by the breakthrough would definitely come. In the next moment, the whole sky suddenly darkened, as if the clouds in the sky suddenly pressed down. Meng Wuya's pupils shrank and he looked at the sky with some fear. The clouds in the sky suddenly parted, and actually separated into clusters of clouds. The streaks of lightning were like dense clouds that had been nurtured for generations. They gathered in one place, but they were clearly separated. They rotated slowly and almost instantly they formed a deep vortex. It was like a huge eye hanging in the sky. What? Heavenly punishment. How can there be such a strange heavenly punishment? Meng Wuya's eyes almost popped out. If not for his eyes, there was a high chance that they would have shot out. A deep sense of powerlessness instantly enveloped Meng Wuya. This time he was really screwed over by Chu Yang. All of Meng Wuya's grief and indignation at this moment came down to these three words. Looking over there were still many people leaping into the sky to chase after Chu Yang. However, such an action was no different from resisting and provoking the heavenly punishment. The heavenly punishment never cared about who it was facing. If it was just one person facing heaven's punishment, then the pressure he would have to bear would be great, but it would not reach a terrifying level. Under heaven's punishment, the danger is great, but most of the time, it would leave a chance for the person to survive. As long as you grasp it, then you will pass. But if you don't, then sorry. But this chance of survival had a prerequisite, and that was to not provoke the heavenly punishment. Once you did, not only would you lose your chance of survival, you would also have to bear the most terrifying counterattack. For example, because of the entanglement with Chu Yang, all of Mo Yunqian's people were here, and under the influence of the heavenly punishment, everyone was standing on the opposite side of the heavenly punishment. In other words, these people had all become the enemies of the heavenly punishment, targets to be eliminated. Under such circumstances, the heavenly punishment did not differentiate between friend and foe, and only knew how to attack together. This was not the main point. The heavenly punishment would not only attack everyone together, but the power of the heavenly punishment would also rise to an even more terrifying level. In terms of strength, this level of strength was enough to kill everyone facing it. And this level of strength was definitely not something that a person could bear. It was almost beyond the limits of what a human could resist. Even if one wanted to escape now, it would be useless. Escaping would only cause one to die faster. Under the heavenly punishment, how could it allow anyone to escape? Chu Yang, are you crazy? Meng Wuya cried out miserably. He clearly understood the situation in front of him, but he was already powerless. He was unable to change this situation that was already destined to die. Crazy. Meng Wuya concluded that Chu Yang was crazy. Because, although this heavenly punishment would cause a large number of casualties in Mo Yuntian, The power of the heavenly punishment now had already surpassed Chu Yang's heavenly punishment by countless times. Chu Yang still had the heart of the heavenly punishment, and he would definitely not be spared. Chu Yang's body floated in the air, and he laughed loudly as he floated under the heavenly punishment. Since we must die, then let everyone accompany me on the road. This is a very profitable transaction. Those at the outermost area, leave immediately. Leave this place at full speed. Meng Wuya shouted with all his might. Those at the innermost area were already destined to face the heavenly punishment because of the influence of the heavenly punishment. They definitely could not escape. But those at the outermost area might still have a chance. It was just a possibility. Meng Wuya almost vomited blood as he yelled. More than 2,000 ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers at the outermost area heard him and dispersed. They were also high-level cultivators. How could they not understand the danger? Naturally, they retreated at full speed. However, countless green lightning bolts shot out from the sky. Even among those who escaped at the outermost area, there were hundreds of people who were identified by the heavenly punishment. The only thing these people could do was to come back and live and die with Chu Yang. Because if they ran again, they would only further implicate their companions. A total of more than 4,000 people, including Meng Wuya, were all wrapped up by Chu Yang and pulled onto the last bus to death. No one could leave and no one could escape. If this last bus was destined to be destroyed, then everyone would go on the road together. If this was a boat that had already started to fill with water and was destined to sink, then everyone was now on the boat, waiting for the time to sink together. Quietly waiting to be overturned. The single eye in the sky rotated together, and then countless different colored lightning bolts came crashing down. Boom boom boom, the whole world started to tremble. The heavenly punishment that Chu Yang triggered was originally different from the rest. Now that it was catalyzed by Mo Yuntian and the rest, it had really reached an unprecedented level. I believe that it was not much different from the heavenly punishment of a true saint. If I can describe it, I would like to describe it like this: tens of thousands of atomic bombs, smashing towards the same place wave after wave. A lightning bolt struck towards Chu Yang. Chu Yang let out a long roar and danced excitedly. He turned into a streak of light and dodged at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, he specially dodged towards a place where there were many people. He laughed loudly. Fighting in the land of heavenly punishment is also very enjoyable. I believe that in all your lives, you have never experienced such a wonderful thing, right? Ah. Come, let us have some fun together. Fuck you. More than 4,000 people cursed in their hearts. You damn bastard. You're really unlucky to have met him this time. Even in their dreams, they did not expect to meet the heavenly punishment head-on just to complete a mission to capture a person. And with such a huge commotion. This was simply an undeserved calamity. In this generation, who would have the chance to meet the heavenly punishment head-on before they had a breakthrough? Right now, I'm doing something that has never been done before and will never be done again. Chapter 1977. As for the heavenly punishment battle that Chu Yang mentioned, everyone was even more speechless. They just took it as Chu Yang farting. And it was the kind that was tasteless and didn't even have a stench. Unspecified currency, learn it? WB. Any unspecified currency now. At every moment, there were tens of thousands of lightning tribulations falling from the sky. Everyone couldn't wait to dodge, who still had the time to fight with you. Besides, fighting with you was equivalent to indirectly facing the most violent lightning tribulations. No one wanted to die so early. An ink cloud guard couldn't dodge in time and was struck by the tribulation thunder of heaven's punishment. With his cultivation he would definitely be injured, but it wouldn't be fatal. However, after being struck by the tribulation thunder, he couldn't help but be slightly delayed for a moment. Then, countless tribulation thunder struck his body at the same time. In the blink of an eye, his entire body turned into black ashes that filled the sky. If there was a first, there would be a second. A third. As the lightning tribulations of the heavenly punishment intensified, such things would definitely become more frequent. Therefore, one by one, the ink cloud guards and silver-armored soldiers died under the lightning tribulations of the heavenly punishment. But if one were to say that Chu Yang didn't live up to his reputation of fighting under the heavenly punishment, then Chu Yang was really wronged. Chu Yang didn't intend to dodge at all, he only knew how to attack. Like a gust of wind, he flitted past everyone without stopping. No matter who it was, he would slash at them with his sword. Then he would leave without caring about the result. Once the opponent was disturbed by Chu Yang's attack, how could they have time to dodge the lightning tribulations? They just had to take the lightning tribulations. As long as they were hit by the first one, they would be paralyzed for a moment. During this short period of paralysis, countless lightning tribulations would strike their bodies. The lightning in the sky seemed to have gone crazy, taking lives at an extremely fast speed. The lightning tribulations in the sky continued to fall endlessly, as if there would never be a moment of rest. At the beginning, the lightning tribulations were only as thick as a wrist. Then they gradually increased to the thickness of a human head, waist, water tank, and finally as thick as a house. With a blue color, purple light flashed as they fell. Every lightning bolt could directly split a mountain into pieces. This was definitely not a metaphor. There was once a tall mountain that was coincidentally struck by a bolt of lightning and turned into a lake. The vicissitudes of life happened right in front of everyone's eyes. Everyone fled in all directions. However, Tianfa also dispersed and chased after them, but its power was not reduced in the slightest. Meng Wuya couldn't help but cry as he looked at the scene before him. Suddenly, a strong hatred for Chu Yang rose in his heart. Even if you're my enemy, this move of yours is too ruthless, too ruthless. Meng Wuya had reached the level of a saint. He had already gone through the heavenly punishment, which was at the peak of the heavenly human stage. Therefore, his current situation was that as long as Meng Wuya did not move, the heavenly punishment would not look for him and would not level up. In the beginning, Meng Tianya had misjudged the level of Chu Yang's heavenly punishment, and had even set up all kinds of defensive measures. But, when the heavenly punishment descended, he unexpectedly discovered that the heavenly punishment didn't target him at all. Only then did he realize that Chu Yang's heavenly punishment was a heavenly punishment. As long as he didn't act recklessly, he wouldn't be implicated. Therefore, Meng Wuya didn't dare to act recklessly. At most, he would give a warning. Once he moved, the heavenly punishment would look for people who provoked him. That would be an act of courting death. However, in the current situation, Meng Wuya still didn't move. The torture for him was even greater. He could only watch helplessly as his subordinates who had followed him for many years died miserably one by one. He could only watch helplessly as Chu Yang came and went. He kept causing trouble, but he couldn't move at all. To be more precise, he didn't dare to move. What kind of feeling was this exactly? This kind of feeling was worse than death for Meng Wuya. But he really couldn't move. He didn't dare to move. If he didn't move, the heavenly punishment wouldn't level up. Then, there would still be a chance for someone to survive. But, if he moved, the heavenly punishment that descended again would be at the level of a saint. That would truly be the case where no one would survive. Meng Wuya's hands and feet trembled. He looked at Chu Yang laughing wildly as he shuttled back and forth in the pouring rain. And his subordinates were constantly being destroyed by the heavenly punishment. 2 streams of tears flowed down his face. During this time, it wasn't that there weren't any heavenly tribulation lightning that fell on Chu Yang's body. In fact, Chu Yang's heavenly tribulation lightning had already struck more than 100 times. But Chu Yang only frowned slightly. He didn't stop at all. He continued to run and dodge. Even though his body was constantly emitting smoke. That was because his muscles had been penetrated by the lightning. Some of his muscles were even necrotic. They were already burning like dry firewood. But Chu Yang didn't care about this at all. He was still moving unhindered. He was still heroic. As he watched, the only thing Meng Wuya could do was to look up to the sky and sigh. He muttered, "If Chu Yang doesn't die in the end, there's no need to wait 100 years. At most 10 years, Mo Yuntian will be in big trouble. Such an opponent is definitely anyone's nightmare. Once he's given time to grow, even if he's the first emperor's empress." Speaking until here, he was horrified. He actually didn't dare to think about it anymore. If he continued to think about it, he was afraid that it would also shatter what little confidence he had left. Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun undoubtedly sowed an unresolvable enmity with Chu Yang this time. Yuan Tianji definitely wouldn't give up on killing Chu Yang. And the result of every pursuit would only make the hatred in Chu Yang's heart stronger. If Chu Yang didn't die in the repeated pursuit, then, these layers of pursuit would also turn around and destroy Chu Yang. A true powerhouse could only be tempered through countless life and death situations. But even Meng Wuya himself had seen countless of Chu Yang's life and death battles. Adding up all the life and death crises that a powerhouse had encountered in their tens of thousands of years of life, perhaps, couldn't even compare to Chu Yang's experience in this half a month. And this kind of experience would still continue. There were only 2 results. First, capture Chu Yang and kill him. Second, Chu Yang gradually grew. In the end, he would grow to the point where even Heavenly Emperor Mo Yun wouldn't dare to deal with him easily. What kind of existence was that kind of existence? Without a doubt it was the level of Emperor 1. Or perhaps even higher. But Chu Yang was still so weak right now, and he had already stirred up a storm in the world. And he would never admit defeat, a personality that would never yield. Once it really reached that point, would Chu Yang choose to swallow his anger and live peacefully? Absolutely impossible. Meng Wuya was so frightened by his own imagination that his hair stood on end. Because now he could already foresee that if Chu Yang could survive in this land of heavenly punishment, he might already be powerless against him. Heavenly punishment rumbled. More than 1,000 heavenly Emperor Mo Yun experts had already perished here. The remaining ones were also hanging on bitterly. Being annihilated was only a matter of time. Chu Yang suddenly let out a long and loud cry. He brazenly flew up and passed through the dense lightning bolts. The tribulation sword gave off a dazzling light. With a swoosh, it brought Chu Yang's body and disappeared in front of everyone. Immediately, heavenly punishment lightning followed. The lightning here was still continuing. Meng Wuya turned pale with fright. But he still couldn't move. He didn't dare to move. He could only grab the stones on the ground anxiously, his eyes wide open. Chu Yang was heading in the direction of the 3 flying boats. In the eyes of the guards on the flying boats, Chu Yang was like an indomitable peerless demon god, flying over with endless wind and thunder. This was definitely not a description. It was a fact. It was a reality. Chu Yang himself might be small, but at this moment he was riding on a sword. The lightning in the sky followed him as he moved. But it was mixed with a terrifying power that was enough to shake the world. It was like a small body, but it had wings that connected heaven and earth. Quick! Start the flying boats and avoid this bastard at full speed. Quick! But everything was too late. The moment they saw Chu Yang with their naked eyes, it was already too late to start the flying boats. Seeing Chu Yang getting closer and closer to them, and the lightning becoming more and more violent, the people on the flying boats jumped down without any backbone and ran away. Damn it. You have already harmed so many people. Don't take care of us too. Chu Yang's body approached the flying boats like lightning. The tribulation sword burst out with brilliant light, and ruthlessly dug a big hole in the sturdy body of the flying boats. Chu Yang rushed in and sneaked into the flying boats like a ghost. Finally he could take a breath. Chu Yang decisively took out a super heavy pill and swallowed it. Just as he put the heavy pill into his mouth, he didn't even have time to check the furnishings of the flying boats when he felt his body shake violently. At this moment at least thousands of lightning bolts hit the flying boats. A glaring and extremely blazing white light suddenly flashed. That was the defensive power of the flying boats. The strongest self-defense mechanism was activated. Chu Yang rolled back and forth on the flying boats like a rolling gourd. The second wave of the heavenly punishment tribulation thunder had already fallen, followed by the third wave, the fourth wave. Only by the third wave the flying boat's defenses were completely destroyed. The next moment, a flying boat exploded with a bang. Under the heavenly punishment tribulation thunder, there was nothing it couldn't destroy. Although the flying boats were made of special materials, they still couldn't resist. Chu Yang pretended to scream, panicking like a stray dog. He was confused like a fish that had escaped the net. His target was the second flying boat. Boom boom boom, and so on. Chu Yang laughed brilliantly and wantonly. He didn't care about the several wounds on his body that were emitting black smoke from the lightning strikes. He rushed all the way back. Behind him, the 3 super flying boats from Mo Yuntian had already turned into 3 huge fireballs at this moment. The burning light almost illuminated half of the eastern royal sky. The 3 flying boats were destroyed by Chu Yang. Meng Wuya's hands and feet were cold. How much manpower and material resources would it take to build 3 super flying boats like this? No one could be clearer than Meng Wuya about this point. But now, it had been completely destroyed by Chu Yang in less than the time it took to drink a cup of tea, to the extent that they were even worse than scrap metal. Chapter 1978. This flying boat is really good, it's really resistant to attacks. Chu Yang looked up to the sky and laughed. He said wildly amidst the lightning and thunder, "It can actually resist heaven's punishment for so long, Good stuff, General Meng. General Meng. If you had known earlier you might as well have given me one. Why bother?" In the end his joy turned to sorrow and he was struck by lightning once. Meng Wuya gritted his teeth and said angrily, "Chu Yang, don't be complacent. From today onwards you and I are mortal enemies." Chu Yang laughed heartily. His sword forced the silver-armored soldier into a fluster. Then lightning struck down and turned this silver-armored soldier into a fireball. Chu Yang laughed and said, "General Meng, what are you talking about? I thought we were already mortal enemies. Could it be that you have never treated me as a mortal enemy before? Otherwise, why did you have to be mortal enemies after today? Are you a few years old and your brain is not as bright?" Ah. Chu Yang only dared to provoke Meng Wuya this time. He also knew that he could not attack Meng Wuya today. It was a life-and-death situation now. He still had a chance of survival. But if he let Meng Wuya attack, heaven's punishment would be upgraded to the level of a saint. He would be finished. Chu Yang laughed heartily. He turned over and stood up, once again entering the battlefield. At this moment there were already many huge lake areas here. The originally lush forest was basically nowhere to be seen. Also, it was not as convenient for Chu Yang to find targets as before. Could even be said that it was very strenuous. Because there were fewer enemies to attack and they were very scattered. He could only follow the lightning. But the danger of doing so would undoubtedly increase greatly. The person who suffered the most from heaven's punishment this time was still Chu Yang. Because after triggering heaven's punishment, the pressure Chu Yang had to bear was several times that of others. Especially his Dantian, which had to bear different types of heaven's punishment. This made Chu Yang's situation even worse. If the spiritual energy in his body was not gushing out more and more crazily, if the Calamity Sword was not able to effectively block a considerable part of it, if he did not have heavy pills, at this moment, Chu Yang might have already turned into a piece of coal. The sky was filled with ashes. Even so, Chu Yang had nearly been turned into charcoal several times, and had the opportunity to turn into ashes. A battle of heavenly punishment was led into the battlefield by Chu Yang in such a manner. It completely changed the situation of the battle. The losses caused by this battle were already incalculable. Even if it was analyzed using the most basic and conservative method. Mo Yun Tian had over 1,000 people participating in this round of battle. Almost half of them were destroyed by the heavenly punishment. There were also the 3 flying boats and the others. Anyway, there were a lot of them. Chu Yang exhausted the last of his strength and continued to rush out. But he still passed by Meng Wuya when he was about to leave. He even waved his hand. "General Meng, come and chase me, didn't you want to fight to the death with me?" Meng Wuya gritted his teeth. If he could catch up. How can this old man let you escape unscathed? The problem now is that the heavenly punishment is about to pass. If I make a move now, none of the 1,000 or so people who barely survived will be able to survive. Therefore, a strange situation had occurred. Enemies were all around them. But everyone couldn't even take care of themselves and was struggling to survive. Chu Yang swaggered past Meng Wuya, and Meng Wuya could only look on helplessly as Chu Yang fluttered away. He couldn't stop him at all and he didn't dare to. For such a situation to occur between 2 parties who were mortal enemies was simply an inconceivable scene. But, under the huge threat of the heavenly punishment, this was the only way. Chu Yang took advantage of the fact that the heavenly punishment wasn't over, and the enemies didn't dare to chase after him, and flew into the forest like a meteor. In the sky behind him, a huge eye followed closely, and lightning flashed, preparing for the final attack. If he could survive this attack, Chu Yang would truly be promoted to the level of a celestial being. However, if he couldn't endure it, he would die and his Tao would vanish, turning into ashes. In a faraway place, Yen Russian and the Eastern Royal Heavens Army watched all this, and everyone's scalp went numb. No one would have thought that Chu Yang would use such a decisive method to fight against Mo Yuntian. Fighting against the heavenly punishment. The fewer people there were, the better. And they had to concentrate all their energy and make all the preparations before they dared to try. Even so, they might not be able to survive safely. The probability of failure was almost as high as 100%. But Chu Yang's breakthrough was actually, the more people there were, the better. What kind of bullshit model was this? Seeing a huge mountain that stretched for 2,000 li being reduced to a flat plain, and even lakes appearing one after another, everyone's hearts trembled incomparably. Everyone couldn't help but sympathize with Mo Yuntian and his men. Encountering such a lunatic, such a lawless murderer, it was really too unfortunate. Yen Russian first condemned Meng Wuya's act of burning the plains, and then extorted a huge sum of money from him. Then he followed all the way thinking about how to make a move at the crucial moment. But now even Yen Russian felt a little speechless. Meng Wuya. Sigh, General Meng is really too pitiful now. If I were to be played like this. Oh, that would be a fate worse than death. But Chu Yang was facing the last heavenly punishment, and it was also the strongest one. Could he survive? Just as Yen Russian was guessing and worrying, and Meng Wuya was also waiting and looking forward to it. Suddenly, a rainbow-colored light burst out from the sky. A brightly colored lightning ball with a purple luster suddenly formed. Then, as if it was going to drill through the entire earth, it fell with a loud bang, in the direction where Chu Yang had escaped. It was an unprecedentedly powerful attack. Meng Wuya stared at it, his eyes full of hope. Under the heavenly tribulation lightning, how could a demon like you not die? There was no justice in this world if you didn't die. Yen Russian and the rest also stared at it, their eyes full of hope. You are a monster, a legend, if you can't die under such destructive tribulation lightning, then you are a monster, a legend. Come on, create another miracle. You are a demon who specializes in creating miracles. Live on. Yen Russian prayed in his heart. The huge ball of lightning. It was as if it had hollowed out the entire sky, and it came crashing down with a long tail behind it. In a flash, it crossed the distance between heaven and earth. Everyone could clearly see that the lightning made a turn, and it followed a strange trajectory that was filled with the principles of heaven and earth. It seemed that Chu Yang was still desperately trying to avoid it. But under the heavenly tribulation lightning, everything was in vain. Then, boom, an earth-shattering sound reverberated. This loud sound shook the earth, the sky, and everyone present was shocked. Even Meng Wuya, who had the highest cultivation level among them, felt dizzy at that moment. Then a huge mushroom cloud rose from afar. Puff, 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 countless gravel of different sizes. It was more than 1,000 times denser than the densest rainstorm, and it spread out in all directions. The next moment, the forest within a few thousand miles was instantly riddled with holes, and it was a scene of devastation. Everyone's reaction was very consistent, and they all gasped in unison. Looking at the pile of gravel in front of them, everyone was speechless. Those shallow lakes that had just been blasted out were instantly filled up, and turned into piles of gravel. Countless people who had been lucky enough to survive the heavenly punishment were in the midst of regulating their breathing, and they were unprepared to be crushed under the gravel again. When they crawled out and looked at the situation in front of them, they only felt their hair stand on end. This was the first time the elders had seen such a profound change in the course of a single heavenly tribulation. It was 10 times or even 100 times more powerful than the legends. It was too exaggerated. In that case, would Chu Yang be able to survive such a terrifying heavenly punishment? This was undoubtedly the biggest question in everyone's heart. After all, Chu Yang's heavenly punishment this time had completely exceeded the degree of heavenly punishment that he should have withstood, and it was more than twice as strong. The last blow could not be avoided, and he could only face it head-on. But even if Meng Wuya was at his peak, he was not confident that he could take this blow, let alone Chu Yang, who had just broken through to the heavenly human stage. Was he destined to die under this attack? Meng Wuya firmly believed that this was the case. If this demon did not die, the heavens would not allow it. Yen Russian also believed that Chu Yang had always been an existence that created miracles. He would definitely be fine. After this huge explosion, the eye in the sky suddenly disappeared, and turned back into a thick layer of clouds. Gradually, the wind also weakened, and only the downpour continued, and it was getting heavier and heavier. Raindrops the size of soybeans fell crazily, and people could not open their eyes. First, do a head count and gather all the survivors and escapees together. Meng Wuya gave his first order after the heavenly punishment. His face was pale and his body was trembling. When he said this, his voice even showed a sense of old and powerlessness. This situation had never happened to Meng Wuya before, and it was definitely not something that should have happened. But at this moment, this situation had happened. This encirclement of Chu Yang was a huge blow to Meng Wuya's confidence. Not long after, Mo Yuntian's team had gathered. Reporting to General, after the heavenly punishment, we still have 2,050 people left. The rest have already. The silver-armored commander stepped forward to report. Hearing this number, Meng Wuya's heart suddenly tightened, and an indescribable pain caused his vision to turn black. Today is Lazy Cat's birthday. Yes, she is the original form of the sneaky wife in the book, Lazy Cat. Birthday girl. Let us wish the birthday star a happy birthday. Every year we will have this day. Last night, I dragged my cousin to have a massage with me, and then we had dinner together. There was also a friend of my cousin's at the dinner table. Cough cough, the most amazing thing was that this friend was actually a fan of our book. One night. Interrogated me for an entire night. Fuck. All the questions about the plot were sorted out and I had to answer them. It was like bubblegum sticking to me and not giving up. Chapter 1979. 2050 people. Not long ago, he had brought 10,000 elites to the Eastern Royal Heavens. He was full of confidence and high spirits. Now he had lost 70% of his men before the mission was completed. Facing such a huge loss, Meng Wuya felt an unbearable sense of defeat. More than 7,000 peak martial saints and even heavenly human experts had fallen just like that. Just for one Chu Yang. Even now, they still couldn't confirm whether the main culprit had already perished in the world. Spread out some men and check carefully. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Even if it's his flesh and bones, I want to know if he's dead or alive. Meng Wuya's face was extremely ugly. Yes, sir. After a while, Mo Yuntian and the rest stood beside a huge lake that was obviously newly opened. They were speechless for a moment. This was the place where the huge lightning ball had landed. Right now, the center was still bubbling with water, and the water level was still rising rapidly. The torrential downpour had turned into countless torrents of water surging into this place. There was no one around. Then was Chu Yang alive? Or dead? Was he going to be reduced to ashes, or was he going to search? Search carefully. Don't let go of any clues. I want a definite answer. Meng Wuya ordered again. Yes, sir. At the same time, Yen Russian and the rest had also landed. When they saw this, they were also dumbfounded and speechless. Chu Yang was dead. This death hunt would naturally come to an end. But what if Chu Yang was still alive? Then this hunt would have to continue. Meng Wuya was praying now. Heavens, please open your eyes and let Chu Yang die. Such an enemy is really too scary. I don't have the energy to play with him anymore. Some hoped that Chu Yang would die, some hoped that he would live. But where was Chu Yang now? When the lightning ball landed, Chu Yang had already stopped in his tracks. There was no point in running. Facing the final attack of Tian Fa, there was no way to escape. He could only bear it. He had to bear it head-on. If he could bear it, he would live. If he couldn't bear it, he would die. It was that simple. At that point in time, Chu Yang's situation had already left Meng Wuya and Mo Yuntian's line of sight. Meng Wuya didn't dare to chase after him, and the others either couldn't take care of themselves, or had already fled far away. As long as he could endure this final attack, everything would be over. However, the degree of terror of Tian Fa's final strike was still beyond Chu Yang's expectations. The moment the huge lightning ball smashed down, Chu Yang let out a muffled groan. His tribulation sword flashed crazily. It was as if he had really gone crazy and started to swing his sword to the extreme. This was definitely the fastest and most frequently wielded calamity sword that Chu Yang had ever used in his life. In that split second, even Chu Yang himself didn't know how many sword moves he had made. In any case, he just kept making sword moves without stopping. There was only one thought in his mind: sword-cutting heavenly thunder. This was a suicidal move, and it was also the ultimate move to defend oneself to the extreme. Clouds and clouds gather. As long as I am alive, you will not have to worry. Chu Yang seemed to have gone mad. His calamity sword flashed with thousands of strands of auspicious chi. In this short blink of an eye, Chu Yang had repeatedly used this move at least 10 times. In that split second, his dantian was emptied. All the power was swept away because of the sword move. And the rich spiritual energy that was constantly flowing in and washing Chu Yang's body was also emptied in that split second, a total of 10 times. A dense defensive sword net blocked the path of Tian Fa's attack just like that. The density of the sword net that Chu Yang had created reached a thickness of 1,000 feet. Surging and surging, it was like a sword mountain that had a life of its own. Chu Yang himself was hidden behind this mountain. With a boom, Tian Fa fell. It was a sword net without any tricks. Layer by layer, it was torn apart and disintegrated. In just a split second, it had already broken through half of the sword net's thickness. Chu Yang roared angrily. The sword intent carried all his essence, chi and spirit as it surged out. Immediately after, there was a huge explosion. Chu Yang felt as if there was a loud bang in his head. Then he didn't know anything after that. This sword, whether it could be blocked or not, he had already done his best. The rest was up to heaven's will. If heaven's will favors me, I will live. If heaven's will forsake me, I will die. That was all. If someone happened to be in the vicinity of the heavenly punishment's final attack, they would discover that Chu Yang's body was like a small blade of grass in the midst of a hurricane. He would have been swept up by the hurricane and would have fluttered into the sky. In the blink of an eye, he would have turned into a feather in the blue dome of heaven, and floated to an unknown location. No one knew how far he had floated. No one knew whether Chu Yang was dead or alive. With Chu Yang's current state, he was still unconscious. When the wind stopped, he fell freely. Could it be that the legendary strongest calamity sword master of the heavens was going to fall to his death? Wouldn't such a way of dying be a little too funny? It was too embarrassing. But in the current situation, it seemed like it was really possible. This was a small and quiet valley. At the end of the valley there was a small hut. A girl in white, with a gentle face, was fetching water from the stream. She used a wooden bucket to carry the water back and poured it into the wooden basin. Inside the wooden basin was a pile of clothes. The sky was especially gloomy. It was obviously going to rain. Lightning flashed and thunder roared in the distance. It was unknown where the heavy rain had started, but it hadn't spread over yet. But the air was heavy and oppressive. In front of the hut, a tall and sturdy young man was sitting with his eyes closed. His whole body was flowing with a kind of sparkling blue light. This kind of color was obviously a sign of peak heaven level. Obviously, this young man was concentrating on cultivating. A broadsword was placed beside him. This broadsword was actually as big as this young man's figure, filled with a majestic aura. After a long while, the young man opened his eyes and stood up with a "whoo" sound. "How was it today? Did you make any progress?" The girl blinked and asked. Her tone was full of concern. "It's going very well. I believe that in a few more days I will be able to absorb all the hidden effects of the medicine." The tall and sturdy young man smiled slightly and said, "This Heaven Imperial Court is indeed a good place. When you and I were being hunted down, we thought that it would be impossible for us to survive. But who would have thought that we would encounter such a great opportunity at the critical moment of life and death? It allowed us to obtain this rare and miraculous medicine. It is true that fortune and misfortune depend on each other. My cultivation has increased by more than 10 levels in these 2 months. But I haven't fully absorbed the medicine's effects. There is still room for improvement. This is your fortune." The girl in white pursed her lips and smiled. "It's our fortune." The tall and sturdy young man held the girl in his arms and said dotingly. The girl in white leaned gently in his arms. Her face was full of happiness. "When I've fully absorbed the medicine, I'll bring you out to roam the martial world and find those old opponents. I believe they should have made considerable progress." The tall and sturdy young man laughed. Between his brows, there was a kind of fierce and domineering aura. "I want to let them have a taste of my current strength." The girl in white said confidently, "They're definitely not as good as you now." The tall and sturdy young man nodded and said, "That's not necessarily true. Since I can get such an opportunity, their opportunities may not be as good as mine. Even if we fight now, it's still hard to say who will win." He said, "It's still hard to say who will win," but his face was full of confidence. It was full of confidence that he would win. "After that wish is fulfilled, the two of us will build a foundation that belongs to us in this Heaven Imperial Court and create a future." The tall and sturdy young man said lightly, "We'll establish a foothold and challenge the world with our swords." The girl in white said softly, "We'll do whatever you say. Whatever you say, it's definitely right. I'll listen to you. Wherever you go, I'll follow you." The tall and sturdy young man smiled contentedly and said, "Yes, wherever I go, you'll follow me. Wherever you go, I'll be there." The girl nodded and her eyes were full of happiness and satisfaction. At this moment there was a sudden swoosh sound as if something flew over. The tall and sturdy young man was stunned and looked up. Just as he looked up, a human-shaped object flew over from the sky and smashed into the small thatched cottage with a boom. Boom. The thatched cottage was instantly torn into pieces. There was a bang sound followed by kacha. It seemed that the only bed in the thatched cottage was also smashed into pieces by the human-shaped object that descended from the sky. Then there was another boom sound. That human-shaped object smashed the thatched cottage and the bed. It didn't lose its strength and smashed a deep hole in the ground, finally ending the process of this collision. The tall and sturdy young man and the girl in white both opened their mouths in shock. Because of this sudden change, they were so shocked that they couldn't figure out what was going on. What was going on? How could this be? Just like that, he watched his own room and his own bed being smashed into pieces without any warning. This feeling was extremely strange. In the blink of an eye, there were only ruins in front of them. This was too. What did my room do to offend you? You just smashed it like that. The tall and sturdy young man strode forward and said, "What exactly is that human-shaped object? How could it be so domineering and actually destroy my room in one go?" He was also bold because of his skills. He didn't care about anything and just rushed in. The girl in white was worried that he would be hurt and hurriedly followed him in. The two of them came in front of the big hole. The place where their room used to be had now turned into a huge hole that was at least 3 feet deep. There was actually a person lying at the bottom. Chapter 1980. It seems like it's a person. This person's entire body seemed to have turned into charcoal. There were even wisps of smoke rising from some places. It was as if a corpse had been placed in a crematorium, but had escaped. It was a very strange feeling. It's a person and he's still alive. The burly young man frowned. He couldn't help but gasp in amazement. This guy is really strong. He flew from such a far place and destroyed my house. He even smashed into the ground. His entire body is smoking and burning, but he's still alive. The girl in white asked curiously. He's not dead. The burly young man nodded slowly. There's still a heartbeat. He's still alive. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then he said, it seems that this guy must have provoked some big trouble. Do you think this person can be saved? We can. The girl in white was very compassionate. Let me see. The burly young man agreed. Then he jumped into the pit and carried the unconscious person out. He turned over and saw the face of the unconscious person. He couldn't help but be startled. Then he was stunned. Then he was shocked. He said tongue-tied, "Oh my God! How could it be him?" The burly young man recognized this person. Who are they? Him? The girl in white was puzzled. Who is he? Is he an acquaintance of ours? The burly young man didn't answer. He just carefully carried the person out. Then, he hurriedly gathered some withered grass and made a simple bed. Then he put the person in his arms on it. Then he took out a medicine bottle from his bosom. Then he took out a pill and put it in the person's mouth. Then he operated his martial arts. He helped the man dissolve the medicine and stabilized his heart meridians so that he would not lose his life. Then he began to carefully treat the hundreds of wounds on the man's body. After busying himself for a while, he finally opened his mouth. Juan, you know this person as well. He is our old friend. He is someone who has helped us before, but he is also our enemy. The white-clothed girl looked at the unconscious and extremely weak face in front of her. She vaguely felt that she knew something. She said, "Is this person also from the Chongtian continent? Otherwise, how could he be an old friend?" "That's right." The burly young man looked at the person in front of him deeply. With a complicated accent, he said, "This person is the common boss of all my opponents, the master of Calamity Sword, Chu Yang." "Ah, it's him?" The white-clothed girl covered her mouth. It was no wonder that the white-clothed girl was shocked. Chu Yang, the Calamity Sword master, was too famous in the Heavenly Layer continent. He was a legendary figure. It was just that at this very moment, this legendary figure had appeared in front of the two of them in such a sorry state. They truly felt that many legends had been shattered. "Isn't it him? He gave me the medicine. It was also him who saved my life. It was also him who gave me heavenly treasures to help me stabilize my foundation. It was also him. He was the one who gave us the medicine and allowed you to ascend with me." The burly young man's voice was filled with too many sighs. The moment he saw the person in front of him, he seemed to recall a lot of long-lost memories. Suddenly, another scene appeared in front of his eyes. But it was also because of him that my clan in the upper three heavens was destroyed. Except for me, no one else survived. It was also because of him that many clans in the upper three heavens, including the Li clan, were also destroyed. The burly young man smiled bitterly. "It's really a tangle of grievances." "Will you save him?" the white-clothed girl asked a little anxiously. "How can I not save him?" The burly young man smiled boldly. "I, Li Xiong too, want to defeat him. But I have to wait until he recovers from his injuries and have a proper battle. How can I, Li Xiong too, take advantage of someone's perilous state and not save him?" This burly young man was Li Xiong too, who appreciated Chu Yang in the Heavenly Layer continent, but also had grievances with him. As for the white-clothed girl, she was Li Xiong tu's wife, Meng Huan, who also came from the Heavenly Layer continent. The white-clothed girl, Meng Huan, heaved a sigh of relief. Then she became worried again, but looking at him, his enemy must be very powerful. "With the strength of the two of us, I'm afraid." Li Xiong tu snorted and said, "Even if the enemy is powerful, so what? Even if the enemy is the Heavenly Emperor of this world, so what? Can I, Li Xiong tu, disregard gratitude and righteousness?" The white-clothed girl heaved a sigh of relief. "Xiong tu, I knew that you're such an indomitable man." Li Xiong tu laughed. "I believe that no one can deny this part. As people of the martial world, if someone respects me, I'll return the favor tenfold. If someone slashes me, I'll kill his entire family. Distinguishing between gratitude and grievances is the right way to be a man. If gratitude and grievances are entangled and cannot be distinguished clearly, then we should repay the kindness first, and avenge the grievances later. Speaking till here, he said, Chu Yang's injuries are really not light. Huan, come and help me. Take out all my medicine for injuries. Also, take out all my treasures. He smiled bitterly. Chu Yang is really good at scheming. Speaking of which, more than half of my treasures were given to me by him in the past. Now I'm going to use them on himself. Could it be that this guy had planned all this in the past? Why didn't I eat them all earlier? How regretful, how regretful. Meng Huan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. You who can calculate for such a long time? Stupid blockhead. Li Xiongtu chuckled. Not long after, under the joint efforts of the husband and wife, all the wounds on Chu Yang's body were carefully treated. Moreover, they were all properly bandaged. If Li Xiongtu were to treat these wounds, even if they could be treated in the end, Chu Yang would probably be wrapped up like a big rice dumpling. And it would definitely be the kind that was unsightly. But under the hands of Meng Huan, every wound was taken care of and bandaged extremely carefully. At the same time, it was also extremely gentle. She would definitely not let Chu Yang suffer even the slightest bit of unnecessary pain. This guy's vitality is still as tenacious as before. Li Xiongtu sighed in amazement. The bones all over his body are almost scattered, and the flesh on his body is almost roasted into charcoal. But he's still alive, and his vitality is still very strong. This is really an anomaly. Meng Huan pursed her lips and smiled. The number of wounds on Chu Yang's body just now made Li Xiongtu and Meng Huan both surprised. There were more than 700 big and small wounds, almost 800 of them. From top to bottom, there was almost no place that was intact. Seeing such a dense distribution of wounds, Li Xiongtu was silent for a long time. Finally he said, You're indeed the legendary Tribulation Sword Master. With so many wounds, if it were me, I'm afraid I'd be dead already. Unexpectedly, a hoarse voice suddenly sounded, Bearing these wounds all the time? It's really better to die like you. This is really not something that humans can bear. Li Xiongtu, don't you think so? Li Xiongtu and Meng Huan were both shocked. The person who spoke was actually Chu Yang. Li Xiongtu had seen Chu Yang's injuries before. With such serious and terrifying injuries, he expected that Chu Yang would be able to open his eyes in 3 days and speak in 10 days. This was already considered very good. But he never expected that Chu Yang had already woken up. Not only could he speak, but he even recognized who he was. This was really too monstrous. He hurriedly turned back and saw that Chu Yang had already opened his eyes and was looking at him. There was a smile in his eyes. Li Xiongtu, you're really young. This is really like a dream. I really didn't expect that the first acquaintance I met in the Heaven Imperial Court was not my brothers, but you. Li Xiongtu laughed. You're indeed the legendary Tribulation Sword Master, the legend of the Heaven Imperial Court. With such serious injuries, you actually woke up so quickly and can still maintain your consciousness. As he said, he walked over and sat on the bed. The bed that was barely supported shook, which indirectly affected Chu Yang's wounds. Chu Yang grimaced. Fuck? Do you know how to talk? Are you praising me or scolding me? You bastard, get up quickly. You're hurting me. Li Xiongtu laughed. Meng Huan was carefully tending to the wounds on Chu Yang's body caused by Li Xiongtu's movements. She grumbled, Xiongtu, you're too much. You could have just stood or sat on the floor. Why did you have to sit on the bed? You're deliberately making people uncomfortable. Li Xiongtu laughed. The moment this bastard came, he smashed the room that I built painstakingly for half a day. If I don't take revenge on him, how can I live up to my hard work? Meng Huan was angry and amused at the same time. She had never seen Li Xiongtu, who was always like a block of wood, who was always mighty and domineering, actually have such a strange side. Even when they were in the Li clan, she had never seen Li Xiongtu so relaxed. But now, seeing Chu Yang, who was entangled with grievances, was different from his usual self. It seemed that this Chu Yang really had a lot of unusual aspects. Then Meng Huan discovered an unbelievable fact. Ever since Chu Yang woke up, the wounds on his body were actually healing at an extremely fast speed. Even those torn muscle tissues were healing by themselves little by little. Also, his body was brimming with an extremely strong and pure spiritual energy, which was aiding in the recovery. However, this kind of restoration was clearly different from the restoration he had seen before. In an extremely short period of time, Chu Yang's body had already recovered a lot. Meng Huanhuan naturally didn't know that this was a blessing from the heavens that Chu Yang had survived the heavenly punishment and was confirmed not to die. She also didn't know that Chu Yang's tribulation space was constantly cleansing the spiritual energy in his body. At this moment, seeing such a situation, she could only be shocked. Brother Chu, who exactly is the other party? How can he make you so miserable? Li Xiongtu asked. Chu Yang smiled bitterly. Brother Li, there's something wrong with your words. I have to remind you. Chapter 1981. Oh? What do you mean? Li Xiongtu looked at him, puzzled. This is from P. In this Heaven Imperial Court, both you and I are outsiders. This is not the Heaven Imperial Court. Our cultivation is more than enough to dominate the Chongtian continent, but in this place, we are basically nothing. Chu Yang said softly, so here I am no longer the Calamity Sword Master, and I am no longer a first-class expert. There are too many experts in this world. We must know our place. Otherwise we will suffer a great loss. Chu Yang said softly but seriously. Li Xiongtu was silent for a while and said, Thank you. I have learned something. Li Xiongtu's words were sincere and sincere. Because he himself knew that his words just now had exposed his somewhat arrogant mentality. That sentence, who is it that can make you so embarrassed? At first, it didn't sound like a big deal, but in fact, it already regarded Chu Yang as a top expert. If Chu Yang was already a top expert, what position did Li Xiongtu place himself in? This top expert strength might even be measured by Chu Yang's level in the Heaven Imperial Court. If Li Xiongtu kept this attitude, as Chu Yang said, he would definitely suffer a great loss. Even suffering a great loss was an understatement. There was a risk of death at every turn. You'd better not get involved in the enemy I'm facing this time. You don't even need to know. Chu Yang smiled. When I'm a little better, I will leave immediately. Brother Li, I'm already very grateful for your help this time. Li Xiongtu's face darkened. Chu Yang, are you looking down on me? Chu Yang smiled bitterly and said seriously, Brother Li, we have known each other for a long time. We've known each other for quite some time. Have I ever looked down on you? However, the enemy this time is really too strong. Moreover, the other party's influence is also a little too big. If you rashly get involved, it will instead make me feel more apprehensive. Chu Yang's words were very straightforward. He even told Li Xiongtu directly that if he got involved, not only would he not be of help to him, but he would also be a burden. If he didn't add to the trouble, he would be of help. They had never been close friends, but Chu Yang understood Li Xiongtu's temperament very well. If he didn't get rid of Li Xiongtu's idea, Li Xiongtu would definitely not give up and would definitely get involved. That he was the one who had really harmed him. However, Li Xiongtu was so worried that he frowned. He said in a low voice, Chu Yang, did you provoke some of the top-ranked super sects in the Heaven Imperial Court this time? Chu Yang smiled bitterly. If it was only a super sect, I would have been more relaxed. At least I would have had the strength to deal with them. But the enemy I provoked this time is 10 times or even 100 times more terrifying than a super sect. Even this comparison is the most conservative estimate. Li Xiongtu sucked in a breath of cold air. Meng Huanhuan immediately covered her mouth. His face was filled with shock. After a long while, Li Xiongtu said cautiously, could it be that you are? What I've provoked this time is the entire Mo Yuntian. Even the Lord of Mo Yuntian, Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian himself. Chu Yang said directly. Li Xiongtu rubbed his eyebrows with 2 fingers and smiled bitterly. I say, Chu Yang, no matter how audacious you are this time, isn't this too big of a game? What did you do to make the entire Mo Yuntian hunt you down? Chu Yang grinned. Actually, I didn't do anything. I just killed the son of Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian, that's all. Li Xiongtu staggered and almost fell to the ground. He stabilized his body with difficulty, but he was already speechless. I have to admit, this enemy, I really can't handle it now. Li Xiongtu looked conflicted. Chu Yang almost laughed out loud. Isn't that so? I admit that I can't handle it either. Damn it. After listening to Chu Yang's explanation of the cause and effect, Li Xiongtu punched his own thigh and said angrily, well done. Well done. Killing such a bastard was only right. Damn it, that Heavenly Emperor Mo Yuntian really doesn't know any better. Brother Chu's actions are clearly to help him clean up his family. He should be grateful to you, but he actually sent troops to kill him. This is simply repaying kindness with enmity. This is unreasonable. Chu Yang was flabbergasted. He stared at Li Xiongtu in a flabbergasted manner. He had been stunned by the words of this guy. What kind of person is this? I seem to have said it very clearly just now. It's me who killed his son. How can he be grateful to me and even if I know that you're speaking for me, it doesn't make sense. The hatred of killing is irreconcilable. If he really wants to thank me for helping him clean up his family, would I dare to believe it? Of course not. Even if he really doesn't find trouble with me, I'll have to be on tenterhooks for the rest of my life. That feeling is probably more terrifying than him directly finding trouble with me like this. Being on tenterhooks for the rest of my life, just thinking about it is scary. Oh, am I crazy, or is Li Xiongtu crazy? How did he come up with such words? As he spoke, Chu Yang acutely felt an endless numbness all over his body. This was a good sign. The appearance of this feeling meant that his wounds were about to heal. After waking up, Chu Yang didn't take any heavy pills to recover his body. This was because after every heavenly punishment, as long as he was still alive, he would be blessed by the heavens. And at this moment, the energy of the heavens and earth would be infused into his body, and he would be reborn. If he rashly used heavy pills, it would be a waste. Any waste now would be shameful, and the consequences would be severe. Just as Li Xiongtu was dumbfounded, he saw the many terrifying wounds on Chu Yang's chest healing bit by bit. Then the wounds formed scabs and the scabs fell off. Chu Yang's skin recovered as if he was never injured, and was as smooth as jade. At the same time, the whistling spiritual energy in Chu Yang's body was also stimulated. It gradually pushed forward and then reconnected all the broken meridians. Like a tsunami, it rushed through his meridians at an extremely fast speed. Chu Yang could feel that his injuries were gradually recovering with each cycle. Moreover, his cultivation had also advanced by a step. With a thought, he opened up his inner vision. To his surprise, he found that his meridians were now as wide as the Yangtze River. The spiritual energy that flowed in his meridians was no longer in the form of mist like before. Instead, it had added a lot of faint golden colors. It came and went with a whistling sound, just like the endless waves on the sea, going back and forth in an endless cycle. Also, his dantian had obviously expanded as well. Another change was the primordial real silk in his dantian. Now, there was a big bundle in each of his dantians. Originally, Chu Yang could still count clearly, there was one more strand. Yes, there were 3 more strands. But now he couldn't even count them. He was really pleasantly surprised. Even though the tribulation space was still quiet, the rich and pure spiritual energy was still flowing into his dantian. However, his dantian was now empty. Even though there was a huge amount of spiritual energy flowing into his dantian, it did not seem to be able to change anything. He no longer felt the sense of crisis of being filled to the brim and was about to burst. Heavenly human level. Although it was only a beginner level. But after all, he had stepped into the heavenly human level. He could be considered to have officially stepped into the level of first-class experts. Chu Yang breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally crossed the threshold of the heavenly human level. On the path of cultivation, he had taken another big step forward. Chu Yang, what level have you reached in your current cultivation? Is it the earth level? Or was it even higher? You should be reaching the heaven level soon, right? Li Xiongtu asked Chu Yang as he roasted meat. Chu Yang had already changed out of his black clothes. He sat beside Li Xiongtu and watched him roast meat. Meng Huanhuan had gone to pick wild vegetables. It's okay. Slightly higher than the heaven level. Chu Yang replied. Higher than the heaven level? Do you already have the cultivation of a saint? How is that possible? You've only been here for a few days. Li Xiongtu really didn't dare to believe Chu Yang's words. No, I'm not a saint anymore. Oh, I know. Are you at the heaven level now? Or the higher level? Haha, my current cultivation is only 1 word higher than the heaven level. What is your cultivation level? Can you tell me directly? Well, okay, I should have just reached the heavenly human level. Just 1 word higher than the heaven level. Chu Yang said casually, hurry up and roast, I'm starving. Pot. Half a rabbit fell from Li Xiongtu's hand and fell into the fire with a bang. Damn, such good rabbit meat, how can you waste it like this? Chu Yang hurriedly scooped it out and said with heartache. But he didn't hear Li Xiongtu's response. Chu Yang turned his head and saw Li Xiongtu staring at him as if he had seen a ghost. Heavenly human level? Cough cough. Chu Yang realized that he had unintentionally acted a little pretentious, and it was the kind that deserved a beating. You. Are you still human? Li Xiongtu was so aggrieved that he wanted to die. I've been cultivating so hard and even had such great opportunities, but I'm still only at the heaven stage. But you've already surpassed the Heaven Stage Saint Stage and reached the Heaven Stage? Is there such a thing as slightly higher, and just one word higher? Cough cough. Actually I'm fine. I just had better opportunities. Chu Yang was speechless for a while and didn't dare to say anything more. If he had known that Li Xiongtu would be beaten so badly by him, he would have concealed a little more. Li Xiongtu was shocked for a while. Then he came back to his senses and laughed. That's great. I have a new goal. He laughed heartily. I've been chasing you all this time, chasing Mo Tianji Gudu Xing Dong Wushang. But I never caught up. It's good that I didn't catch up. If I did, I'm afraid I'll slack off. I'll just let you all run in front. It's also a kind of fun for me to keep chasing. His voice was full of pride and there was no hint of disappointment at all. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.